The fun life of a troll in the Marvel Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226. The gun shop attacked. The quarrel between the uncle and nephew was finally suppressed by Pepper. When they return home, the two sides signed a non-aggression treaty and returned the handles in their hands to the victims. After all, it was impossible not to return them. Tony really couldn't dance anymore. God knows what Pepper's reaction would be when she saw a bunny man dancing funny steps with a tired face when she returned home. Not to mention Sherlock, who seemed to have returned from a trip to Thailand. Anyway, the uncle and nephew did not dare to provoke Pepper at this time. The uncle and nephew deeply agreed that there was only a wrong name, but no wrong nickname. If the two continued to quarrel, Pepper might have to change his name to Little Tiger. Fortunately, on the second night, Sherlock also returned to his original appearance. Without the 2 lumps of fat on his chest, Sherlock can be said to be extremely happy. Of course, since Sherlock is already in Tony's house, he will naturally not do nothing. The most important point is to give his equipment a big upgrade. Thanks to the magic stone found in the shield, those goblin creations that Sherlock could only drool at before can now be exchanged without any pressure. This wave of Sherlock can be said to be an epic change. The first is a way of changing clothes. Sherlock can now do it like Doctor Strange. Just pull clothes or something else to transform, instead of having to have that collar rope. Of course, the most important thing is the upgrade of the helmet. Sherlock abandoned the cyberpunk helmet and replaced it with a pair of glasses that integrate all the functions of the helmet. The most important thing is that this pair of glasses can be said to be the most perfect product of the combination of magic and technology. While retaining all the technological attributes of the helmet, it can blur the face of the wearer. And the most important thing is that this blurred boundary is determined according to people's familiarity with Sherlock. For example, Tony, this guy looks at Sherlock as Sherlock himself with glasses, while Pepper has a feeling of Superman wearing glasses and pretending to be Clark. To put it simply, the temperament and face shape have changed a lot, but it is still possible to recognize that this guy is Sherlock. As for completely strangers, Sherlock has also experimented with it. What he saw was a group of black mists that kept drifting away, with eyes flashing with golden light, just like the headless knight in the movie. Combined with Sherlock's extremely elegant dark gold outline formal suit and coat outside, it looks mysterious and a little oppressive. In short, Sherlock himself is very satisfied with the set. And the most amazing thing is that even the photos are like this. People who are familiar with Sherlock see the original appearance of Sherlock, and those who are not familiar with him are shrouded in black mist, which makes Tony know that this thing is too unscientific. Well, it is indeed unscientific, but it is very magical, isn't it? Tony also updated some parameters of the Mark 42 armor. At least there will be no situation like Sherlock being beaten by the armor. The only thing to pay attention to is the fatal chicken beating. After all, even if the strength of that piece is small, it is easy to become a cooked prawn if the method is not right. Tony even learned some magic pattern knowledge from Sherlock when Sherlock was modifying his helmet. At least, there would be no disposable armor like the Avengers armor. Tony is already considering using this technology in the next generation of armor. Of course, the price is to modify Sherlock's car again. This time, Sherlock's car can not only prevent the burning of the Rainbow Bridge, but also boast that it can withstand a shell from the RPG. In short, Sherlock and Tony are both very satisfied. In order to celebrate the recovery of both of them, at noon on the third day, the two specially ordered a lot of tequila as a celebration. But as the saying goes, happiness leads to sorrow. When a person is happiest, some unexpected things often happen. For example, when Sherlock and Tony were eating and drinking, Sherlock received a call from Price. His gun store was attacked. To be honest, Sherlock has never felt so angry before. Even in his life before crossing, he was not as angry as he is now. You have to know that after Sherlock traveled through time, he faced a strange world full of dangers. Sherlock's 5 uncles and the Talalata gave Sherlock the warmth of his family. Although they were not related by blood, Sherlock had already put these people in the same position as Tony, family. Now that his home was attacked, how could Sherlock not be angry? Without saying a word, he took out his wand and went home to see what was going on. Fortunately, Tony was still rational and held Sherlock tightly. Only after persuading her that Sherlock suppressed his anger and drove Tony to his gun shop. Although SHIELD has disappeared now, it does not mean that there is no trouble. Tony, who has never hidden his identity from the beginning, knows that trouble will follow after his identity is exposed. And Tony is not a fool. Although everyone knows that he is Iron Man, no one knows where he lives. Unless you can stay away from the crowd, or keep moving like Captain or Nutrition, it is difficult to avoid trouble. Didn't you see that Black Braised Egg and Black Widow were still attending the hearing in Washington, because their identities were exposed? Sherlock almost stepped on the floor with all the grease on the way. It usually takes about half an hour or 40 minutes to get there, but this time Sherlock arrived at the door of his shop in just 15 minutes. The two-story gun shop had collapsed for the most part. At the door, the Unit 01 and Unit 02 that Tony gave Sherlock were like melted candles, fixed on the ground in an attacking posture. Sherlock's 5 uncles stood aside with dark faces, watching groups of police and Fobo go in and out of the ruins of the gun shop. After seeing that his 5 uncles were fine, Sherlock was relieved. However, before he saw the 2 little girls, Sherlock did not dare to relax completely. He quickly walked towards his 5 uncles and began to ask, "Where are Lorna and Mindy?" Seeing Sherlock rushing over, Price also breathed a sigh of relief before answering Sherlock. "The 2 little girls are fine, they just got a little frightened. A Black Widow who was cashing at the front desk was slightly injured. Thanks to the cash register you renovated 7 years ago, otherwise there would be deaths this time." Sherlock was relieved to hear that no one was injured or killed, but he was still very angry in his heart and began to ask Price who was so bold to attack here. After hearing Sherlock's question, Price just glanced at Tony who was standing next to Sherlock and then spoke. "I don't know, but if my guess is right, this attack should be aimed at you, because you are Tony's nephew. In other words, this attack is aimed at the playboy behind you, me." Tony was shocked after hearing Price's words and asked with an unbelievable look on his face, pointing at himself. Yes, according to the injured widow, the attacker was a black man. After entering the room, he revealed Sherlock and your identities, and then the man blew himself up. Seeing that something was wrong, the Black Widow pressed the alarm button and hid under the cash register to save her life, while the 2 robots protected Lorna and Mindy who were resting in the bedroom. Miraculously, the man walked out of the ruins unscathed after the self-explosion. The 2 robots chased him, and as you can see, if the memory module was not burned, the man's appearance should still be preserved. After listening to Price's words, Sherlock was stunned. At this moment, he knew who was the mastermind behind the explosion. Killian. Fuck your grandma. Sherlock turned around and went to find trouble with the villain in Iron Man 3, but was pulled back by Price. Hearing the strange name from Sherlock's mouth, Price's face was very serious. "Calm down, Sherlock. The underground world has its own rules. I don't care how you determined that Killian is the culprit, but we need evidence and a legitimate reason. Come back and stand still now. The training ground will stop training for a month, and as the master of the training ground, you need to use our rules to retaliate fiercely, instead of fighting alone." After listening to Price's words, Sherlock could only gradually calm down and stand behind Price with a dark face. In any case, Killian is already equal to a dead person in Sherlock's eyes. The reason why Sherlock has always avoided using the unforgivable curses, because both Dumbledore and Grindelwald's notes are full of warnings about the erosion of the mind by the unforgivable curse, so Sherlock has always avoided using it. But this time, Sherlock really wants Killian to experience the so-called unforgivable curse gift package. Chapter 227 Sherlock, why am I stuck in the middle? Tony just finished speaking when he couldn't help but let out a pig-like laugh. It's not Tony's fault. After all, it's really fun. Tony even thought about whether he should put this thing on the market to give relief to the group of parents who are also suffering from naughty children. After all, the law in Lighthouse is the same as that in Hong Kong. That is, it is absolutely forbidden to beat children. Otherwise the police and child welfare agencies will intervene. In Hong Kong, you can take your children to Shin Sin to beat them every weekend, but in Lighthouse, there is really no way. Tony can even imagine how popular the thing will be after it is made into a toy and put it on the market. When facing naughty children in the future, parents will order the naughty children who have caused trouble to wear this thing. Well, it may need a little setting. When the naughty child does not make a mistake, this thing is just a toy, and the speed of the parts flying over is slower, so as not to cause any feeling. But once the naughty child angers the parents, then, well, anyway, the final result is probably not much different from Sherlock. Sherlock, who hasn't slowed down on the ground, will never think of what kind of uproar will cause this wave of words in the future. I have to find the field back. I just want to see a joy. Why did she become a joy? The two lights hit Tony. The next second, Tony, who was still laughing, was frightened that he couldn't control his body. It would be fine if it was just a simple dance, but the most important thing was that Tony's two big teeth began to grow wildly, and in just a short while they had grown to the position of his chest. Fortunately, Sherlock still retained a little rationality and did not really let Tony's front teeth be like a big stick. But even so, the whole scene was funny enough, and this time it was Sherlock's turn to laugh. Sherlock stood up with his old waist and laughed wildly while pulling off the mask that had just given him a big fight. Looking at Tony with two long big teeth and still dancing funny steps, Sherlock always felt that something was missing. He waved the magic wand again, and a pair of long rabbit ears with white fluff appeared on the top of Tony's head. Well, this time it was right. Looking at Tony, who looked like the funny rabbit in the animation, Sherlock laughed even more happily and even silently raised his mobile phone to record a video. Although Tony tried his best to object, it was useless. How to describe it? It was like a big rabbit dancing the chopstick stick in nostril dance of Luffy in One Piece. Funny and interesting. If this picture gets out, Tony's character as a playboy and Iron Man will collapse the next day. What? Dispel magic? Dispel shit. Just let Tony, the old bastard, dance. Sherlock even calmly chose a funny tune for Tony, then ran to the workbench where Tony had just stood while laughing, and asked Jarvis to help take off the damn armor. As for why Tony didn't object, well, Tony was actually sending a telegram, but because of those two rodent-like front teeth, no one could hear what he was saying. As for why Sherlock couldn't wait to take off the Mark 42 armor, the reason was actually very simple. It hurt. This guy, who would have thought that a wizard, the most mysterious Avenger in the Avengers, would be beaten by an armor one day. Sherlock said that he couldn't afford to lose face, so he applied the medicine first. Anyway, he had something that could make Tony collapse, so the worst that could happen was that both sides would be destroyed. Sherlock, who was feeling proud, completely forgot that his potion had side effects. He used the Philosopher's Stone to turn a little gold, and then exchanged it for a potion for bruises in the exchange machine, and began to apply it. But as Sherlock applied it, the potion began to work, and Sherlock began to notice something was wrong. Damn it, it seemed like he had forgotten something, and he always felt that something was wrong. It was okay, but why did he feel so heavy on his chest? It was as if something had fallen on his chest. He looked down, and ugh, how did that saying go? A woman who can't see her toes when she looks down is the most beautiful woman in the world. Sherlock, who suddenly felt something was wrong, almost subconsciously touched it, and it was still there. Wait. Can't see your toes when you look down. Damn it. Without caring about Tony, who was still laughing and dancing in the same place, Sherlock hurried to a glass that could be used as a mirror. After seeing his current appearance, Sherlock was completely autistic. Just looking at his figure, this is definitely a figure that only exists in comics. If there is a woman who can have the same figure as Sherlock, she is definitely the most beautiful woman in the world, and is the object of pursuit by countless men. But Sherlock's face, well, how to say it? It's feminine, but not completely feminine. After all, the dragon is still there, and the softness reveals the fortitude that belongs only to men. Combined with that most beautiful figure in the world, it gives people a feeling of abnormal tearing. Looking at the entry on the top of his head, combined with his current image, Sherlock doesn't know why. He really has an impulse to destroy the world. Entry: cross-dressing Big Brother entry effect. Literally a cross-dressing Big Brother, the product of a special trip to Thailand. But it seems that this trip to Thailand is not so perfect, perhaps because of too little medicine or insufficient time. It is recommended to take a little more. It may have miraculous effect. Entry time: 23 hours, 30 minutes and 21 seconds. Looking at the entry on the top of his head, Sherlock was so angry that he threw the potion in his hand to the ground. Go up. Go up. This is even worse than the complete transformation between the captain and Tony. Why are there beauties everywhere for others, but I'm stuck in the middle this time? Damn, it's tie-tie bullshit. Sherlock, who was extremely angry, almost covered his face and ran to the guest room of Tony's house without paying any attention to Tony, who was still dancing with buck teeth in the back. Seeing Sherlock escaping from the basement with his face covered, Tony, who was originally gloating, didn't care about laughing and tried to maintain an Urkang hand posture and shouted, "Deng Yixing. Wow, here, accompany me, the street soldier. Wait a minute, I'm still here. Help me to remove the magic." Chapter 228 Uncles at Full Power. Unlike Sherlock's anger, Tony felt more guilty. He didn't know who Killian was, but he still felt ashamed that Sherlock was attacked because of him. This was also the reason why he tried his best to stop Sherlock at the beginning. Everyone on Earth knew that Iron Man was Tony. After not finding a chance to attack him, it was inevitable that he would attack the people around him. After thinking for a long time, Tony, who felt more and more guilty, said to Price, "I'm sorry, Captain Price, this is my problem. I will definitely find the murderer as soon as possible and give everyone an explanation." After saying that, Tony wanted to turn around and leave here to summon the armor, to scan the scene to see if he could find any useful information, and deal with Unit 01 and Unit 02 at the same time, to see if there were any images of the suspect, and to try to repair them. After all, this time, it was fortunate that these two robots protected the Talalita resting in the bedroom very well. Tony still liked these Talalita very much, and did not intend to let these two robots, who could be said to be heroes, retire. However, Tony was stopped by Price before he took 2 steps. Price stepped forward and grabbed Tony's shoulders. His weathered face was full of seriousness. His voice was slightly hoarse as he spoke to Tony. "Listen, Kit, I don't care who you have offended or what trouble you have, but since these guys dared to attack here, it is definitely not a matter of one person. So, I don't care what you are going to do next, but I will never allow you to interfere in our affairs again." Price's words were serious and even a little unpleasant, but Tony, who was always known for his bad temper, did not refute at all. He walked to the scene silently and started doing his own things. The reason why Tony did not refute Price's words was that on the one hand, Tony knew that the old man did not have a very good impression of him, and on the other hand, Price was one of Sherlock's closest people, and Tony did not want to embarrass Sherlock. Looking at Tony, who said nothing but walked towards the scene, Price's eyes rarely flashed with a sense of appreciation. Sherlock naturally noticed Price's expression and breathed a sigh of relief. You know, in the past, Price had forbidden Sherlock and Tony to have any contact, and the limit was pepper. When did Price stop blocking Sherlock and Tony from having any contact? Probably after Tony was kidnapped. Never underestimate Price's intelligence ability, even this time. After seeing that no one was disturbing him, Price grabbed Sherlock's fate by the scruff of the neck and led the remaining 4 people to the back of the training ground. They went all the way to the warehouse for training CQB not far away. In Sherlock's shocked eyes, he opened the door of a basement and walked in with a few people. The entire basement was exactly the kind of mission briefing room in the movie, with a huge screen embedded in the wall, a conference table in the middle, and all kinds of intelligence piled on the conference table. Sherlock was completely stunned. Where the hell did this place come from? Sherlock had lived in this training ground all his life, and didn't know there was such a place here. Although Sherlock's jaw almost dropped to the ground in surprise, Price had no intention of explaining to Sherlock. After throwing Sherlock on a chair, the 5 uncles sat down one after another, and Price sat in the main seat. "Soap, tell me what you know." After Price gave the order, Soap inserted a USB flash drive into the USB port on the table and took out several documents and distributed them to everyone, including Sherlock. The documents contained photos of the scene and some reports that Sherlock could not understand. The large screen embedded in the wall lit up immediately after Soap inserted the USB flash drive, and the content displayed was almost the same as the documents in the hands of the general staff. Seeing that all the preparations were done, Soap stood up and pointed to several photos of the scene and began to speak. First of all, according to the traces at the scene, the explosive was an object about 1.7 meters tall. Yes, you read that right, the height of a normal man. According to the environment at the scene, the explosion site almost produced a temperature of more than 3000 degrees Celsius, and basically everything within 12.5 meters would be vaporized at this temperature. And the amazing thing is that no traces of explosives were detected at the scene. In other words, this is still an explosive that is not an explosive. When he said this, Ghost raised his hand, looked at the document in his hand with a disgusted expression, and said slowly, "Wait a minute, is it another human bomb? The kind that is buried in the body during surgery?" Facing Ghost's question, Soap snapped his fingers and then continued. "That's a good question, but unfortunately it's not the case. Based on battlefield experience, if it's the situation you described, the human body will be torn apart and launched out the instant the shock wave appears. Even the high temperature afterwards would make it difficult to completely remove all traces of human tissue. But this time, no human tissue was detected at the scene. So after ruling out all possibilities, I'm more inclined to believe that the so-called person who walked into the store is a moving bomb." After Soap finished speaking, he sat down in his seat. Only then did Gates stand up and continue speaking. "I have asked my friends, K, Fobo, informants and friends in the Ministry of Defense, and I have some clues. First of all, according to intelligence from Fobo, there are not just one or two explosions like this, but there are many places with explosions like this, and even the explosion site is just as Soap said. This matter has been brought to the attention of the Ministry of Defense and the group of executives sitting in the office drinking coffee. Everyone from top to bottom has taken this matter very seriously and started an investigation, but with little success. In order to suppress such public opinion, our stupid president even planned to repaint the armor that Tony gave to that Air Force friend and renamed it Iron Patriot to divert public attention. But there was a piece of news from K that caught my attention. In the Middle East, there was a man named Mandarin who had emerged suddenly. The armed forces he led were evil in the Middle East, and most of them were aimed at the lighthouse, including suicide attacks like this. However, according to my investigation, this so-called Mandarin was just a second-rate British actor named Trevor Slattery. Someone helped him cover up his traces in the UK, but the cover-up method was too crude and could not withstand a close examination. There is another point that makes me very curious. An informant told me that recently there have been many cases of limb regeneration in the underground world, and some people even said that it can change their lives. Many people have tried it, but after repairing their bodies, these people disappeared inexplicably after only showing up a few times. No trace can be found, as if they evaporated out of thin air. I simply compared it with the schematic diagram of the explosion site obtained from Fobo, and found that the distance between the people who participated in the repair of limbs and disappeared in the place where the explosion occurred was not very far, and they basically matched. So I guessed that the explosion was most likely related to this limb repair technology. As soon as Gates finished speaking, a document was projected on the big screen, an internal document of the Ministry of Defense. Ghost said while operating the computer, "I found a document inside the Ministry of Defense. It is a soldier repair plan. According to the document, the limbs lost by soldiers in war can be repaired. A company called AIM has undertaken this work. Moreover, this company is inextricably linked to the president. I think everyone should have heard the name of the person in charge of this company, Aldrezi Killian." After that, almost everyone's eyes were focused on Sherlock. Sherlock did not react at all, and his whole face was extremely surprised. After all, he knew that Killian was the mastermind behind the scenes with his third eye, and his uncles, relying only on some documents and intelligence, analyzed that Killian was the mastermind behind the scenes. This is really too dreamy. Chapter 229 FXXK New Guy. Seeing Sherlock's silly look, Price was really furious. After all, Sherlock was trained by him, so why was he still so silly? However, Zhao Qiang, who was sitting next to Sherlock, reacted quickly and stepped on Sherlock hard under the table. Sherlock finally reacted and looked at his uncles in friendly eyes. He coughed twice and then spoke. Ahem, I don't know much about Killian. I just know that Killian is the developer of Extremis and the founder of AIM. He was originally a crazy fan of Tony Stark and wanted to attract investment from Tony when the laboratory encountered a crisis. But he was ignored by Tony and stood up. When he saw the fireworks, when he was about to commit suicide, he felt the desire for revenge and decided to do his own research. After that, in addition to cooperating with Mayor Hansen to develop Extremis, he found Trevor Slattery to play the Mandarin and began to rule behind the scenes. Oh, by the way, the so-called Extremis is the virus that can self-destruct. In fact, the real bomb is those who are injected with Extremis. But not all people are bombs. As far as I know, his men and himself can control Extremis, which can make the human body produce extremely high temperatures out of thin air, and can even melt steel. Killian's plan is to get rid of the president, and then persuade Vice President Rodriguez to exchange Extremis for his disabled daughter to restore his missing right leg. He truly controls the entire United States behind the scenes. In addition, as the behind-the-scenes boss of the actor, he controls most of the resources in the Middle East and can almost easily rule half of the world. And Tony might be one of the people he must avenge on his way to becoming king. According to criminal psychology, Killian's goal is probably to destroy everything around Tony, including his relatives, lovers, and friends, so that Tony can experience the same despair as he did on the roof, so as to achieve the purpose of revenge on Tony. Sherlock talked a lot, and after he finished speaking, he grabbed the water on the table and drank a sip with a guilty look. He almost said it clearly when he looked at Price. Don't do this next time, I'm scared. Price ignored Sherlock, tapped the table with his fingers, and moved his eyes to the ghost, who had been operating the computer. The ghost ignored Price's gaze and tapped the keyboard on his hand. After a while, he turned the screen to Price and said, "There's no way to find Killian's whereabouts. This guy is extremely cautious about his whereabouts and residence. However, we did find AIM's headquarters building, but it doesn't seem to work. I hacked into the building's cameras and several computers inside, and most of what I found were administrative documents. And according to the power supply, there is no laboratory or the like in the building. In other words, the entire AIM building is full of ordinary civilians, and there is a high probability that we will not find any evidence about AIM and Killian's whereabouts." After hearing the ghost's report, Price tapped the table with his fingers and touched his chin in thought. After a long while, he said this: "Let's call the Black Widows out. Finding intelligence is their specialty. One of their people is injured. I believe they will not refuse. Let them find out Killian's whereabouts. As for us, Soap, Gates, Zhao Qiang, and Ghost, go back and organize your equipment. We haven't taken action for a long time. Some people have forgotten how terrible we are. Remember, this time our enemies are a group of little firemen who can explode. No one is allowed to approach. Kill them quickly. I believe I don't need to teach you what kind of equipment you should have, right?" Following Price's order, the 5 uncles who originally looked friendly suddenly seemed to have changed into different people. Everyone's eyes revealed a strong murderous aura, and the corners of their mouths also had a bloodthirsty smile. After responding, the 4 people turned around and left the basement without hesitation, leaving only Sherlock, who looked confused, and Price, who was still sitting in his original position. Seeing that everyone had left, Sherlock showed a bitter face and complained to Price. "Uncle Price, there is no need to put you in danger, right? I can just deal with Killian. You know, I know magic. It's easy to deal with that genetically modified person." Facing Sherlock's complaints, Price snorted coldly before saying, "Do you think I don't know? Brat, you have to remember what kind of business we are in. Countless jackals, tigers, and leopards are watching our training ground. If we don't react, and only you take action, believe it or not, within a month, the entire training ground will be divided up by various forces. This attack is a signal, and it is also a touchstone for various forces to test whether our training ground is still necessary. You must know that those stupid looking students in the training ground have never been good people. They are just jackals, tigers, and leopards who have put away their fangs. Listening to Price's words, Sherlock was inevitably surprised and broke into a cold sweat because what Price said was not wrong at all. Whether it was the gangs or the mainland hotels or the official K and Fobo, they were all watching how the training ground would react. Sherlock could certainly quickly deal with Killian by using the wizard's vest, but this also meant that the entire training ground had to endure this attack. Some people might not touch the interests of the training ground for the sake of the wizard, but there would always be brave people who would constantly test the bottom line of the training ground. It is foreseeable that, if no action is taken, there will be a lot of trouble in the future. While thinking about Price's words, Sherlock followed Price out of the underground conference room and came to an armory. After Price picked and chose, he threw Sherlock a fully equipped honey badger, a complete set of combat uniforms, and corresponding assassination equipment. Then he began to pack up his equipment, and while packing, he told Sherlock, "Brat, remember, put away your magical tricks for this operation. There are too many people watching us. If you want to keep causing trouble for the training ground in the future, you can use your tricks without scruples. Otherwise, follow us as I taught you. As the master of the training ground, you can't escape." After listening to Price's words, Sherlock did not refute and quickly changed all the equipment that Price threw to him. After all, this was an operation with the 141 Special Forces. To be honest, Sherlock actually wanted to act with his uncles for a long time. If Sherlock was dissatisfied with this operation, it was only the yellow bullets in the magazine in his hand. Sherlock stuffed the magazine that Price gave him into the magazine rack with some doubts. After holding it in for a long time, he finally asked the question he wanted to ask. "Uncle, can this thing really kill those little firemen with a body temperature of 3000 degrees? Faced with Sherlock's question, Price just smiled, patted the MK-18 in his hand and then spoke. "Subsonic tungsten core bullet, guarantee a little cutie. Let's go." When Sherlock followed Price to the hall, the remaining 4 uncles of Sherlock had already equipped themselves. Looking at the 141 task force that was exactly the same as in the game, Sherlock was also rarely excited. Many forces are watching this battle. I don't want any casualties, understand? Oh hi. For as Price's voice fell, Gates, Zhao Qiang, Ghost and Soap all roared and stood straight. Influenced Sherlock also quickly joined the team of the 4 uncles and stood straight. Looking at the team in front of him, Price smiled with satisfaction and said to everyone, "Very good, let's go to Ames building, find their executives or documents, and force them to tell us where the lab is. We need to eliminate the lab." Oh hi exclamation point quote asterisk 5. Another neat roar, but this time Sherlock joined in. Just when Sherlock was ambitiously preparing to follow his uncles to experience the real-life version of Call of Duty, Soap grabbed Sherlock who was following the team. He took out 2 Velcro strips from his trouser pocket and stuck them on Sherlock's chest and back without saying anything, completely ignoring Sherlock's face that was almost as dark as the bottom of a pot. After seeing that the 2 Velcro strips were stuck, Soap nodded with satisfaction and said, "FNG, this is our old tradition. Rookie, stick it on honestly." After saying that, Sherlock's 5 uncles laughed at the same time, and only Sherlock looked at the green Velcro strip with a constipated face. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230 Operation Codename, Keep It a Secret 1. Time 2012.10.13, 1 p.m. Weather, sunny and partly cloudy. Location, a high-rise building next to the AIM building. Mission personnel, 141 Task Force. Sherlock mission description: observe the movements of personnel in the AIM building, collect sufficient intelligence, and prepare support for the infiltration at night. In a well-decorated apartment, there is a dining table near the window in the living room. Ghost is like a sculpture at this time, holding a Barrett M82A1 anti-material sniper rifle, concentrating on watching every move in the opposite building through the scope. The sun shines through the curtains, giving Ghost, who is wearing a tactical uniform and a skull mask, a beautiful golden color. Price is holding a cigar in his mouth, holding a huge telescope in his hand, standing next to Ghost, and Ghost is also observing the busy workers in the opposite AIM building. Far away from the two, Gates is constantly typing on a computer on a desk that looks very technological. Although the three of them were doing their own things, for some reason they all had a harmonious and powerful beauty. Not long after, the door of the apartment was opened, and Soap and Xiao Qiang, who were wearing maintenance personnel uniforms, walked into the room, talking and laughing, carrying some military valuable safe deposit boxes. As Xiao Qiang closed the door, the two people's expressions quickly changed from the relaxed feeling of talking and laughing to the murderous look of soldiers, even though they were wearing ordinary maintenance personnel uniforms. The two of them casually put the boxes in their hands on the bar not far away, and went into the bedroom to change clothes. When they appeared again, they had restored the iron-blooded tough guy look in the training camp. After walking out of the room, Soap sat on the sofa in the living room and lit a cigarette by himself, while Xiao Qiang walked to the refrigerator not far from the kitchen, and took out a bottle of iced coke and drank it. Price's voice also sounded at this time. Is everything done? Although Price was talking to Soap, his whole body did not move at all, and he was still holding a telescope and observing the other side. After hearing what Price said, Soap calmly held a cigarette in his mouth, picked up his own gun on the coffee table, and answered while checking it. Of course, no one noticed the floor. Xiao Qiang and I have placed the rope gun on the top floor, and it can be used at any time. The door to the top floor has also been locked by us, so no one will find it. Even if someone sees us, they will only think that something is broken, and the maintenance team came to repair it with great fanfare. We also brought night vision equipment and infrared imaging equipment for sniper rifles, which are enough for this operation. After hearing what Soap said, Price put down the telescope in his hand, turned around and looked at Soap sitting on the sofa and said, "Very good. Great job. We will take action tonight." Soap, Xiao Qiang and Sherlock will enter the AIM building to look for intelligence. Ghost and I will provide you with support, and Gates will provide technical support. There is only one chance, so be careful to keep quiet. After Price finished speaking, everyone responded softly, including Ghost, who was still lying on the sniper rifle. After seeing everyone respond, Price nodded and continued to observe the opposite side with a telescope. The entire 141 team had their own things to do, giving people a sense of tacit understanding, coldness, efficiency, and sharpness. Except Sherlock. What is Sherlock doing at this time? I saw the fire in the kitchen was all over the sky, and the tempting aroma kept coming out of the kitchen, running silently into everyone's nose, trying to seduce the greedy bugs in everyone's stomach in the room. That's right, Sherlock is flipping a big spoon in the kitchen. As for why Sherlock has fallen into a cook army, it's all tears to talk about this matter. In Sherlock's impression, the actions of Task Force 141 were either silent infiltration, like a hidden shadow, that could solve all enemies at any time with a tacit, cold, efficient and sharp attitude, and then evacuate quietly, or with great momentum, without any dragging of the whole process. Or it was a passionate battle, everyone transformed into a fierce general wandering among thousands of troops, facing waves of enemies, standing on the tip of the knife and dancing, aiming, shooting, knocking down the enemies rushing up over and over again, and finally completing their tasks and returning triumphantly. But the reality is that after Price came to Sherlock and said he wanted to take action, he took Sherlock to rent an apartment opposite the AIM building to observe the dynamics of the staff of the AIM building. Everyone has a corresponding job, except Sherlock. Sherlock had no choice but to play the role of a cook like at home, responsible for everyone's 3 meals a day for the past 2 days. There are cold, efficient, tacit, and sharp, but the coldness is the ingredients bought, the efficiency is Sherlock's speed of serving, the tacit understanding is Sherlock's cooperation with the kitchen utensils, and the sharpness is Sherlock's knife skills in handling the ingredients. Sherlock even has the passion he wants, but this place is in the kitchen. Watching all kinds of ingredients tumbling in the wok, the clouds and mists carrying the fragrance accompanied by the splashing of grease and flames, doesn't it make people's blood boil? Hot ass. Sherlock almost lost control of his emotions and threw the spatula into the pot. But what should be done still has to be done. After all, Sherlock has heard what Price said, and he can act tonight. After all, reality is not a game or a movie. You can't really kill everyone like in the game. In fact, it is not impossible to do what is in the game, but the power required is too huge. You have to know that the 141 in the game can only be done with the entire state machine behind it. The current 141 obviously does not have this capability, but although it is a little troublesome, it does not hinder the mission execution at all. With a helpless sigh, Sherlock brought the last dish of 3 fresh vegetables to the table and began to invite everyone to eat. At Sherlock's invitation, Price, Soap, and Xiao quickly came to the table to eat, but Ghost and Gates were still doing their own things motionlessly. Sherlock was used to this. After Price and the others finished eating, they would take over the shift. There was nothing to be surprised about. In less than 5 minutes, Price had stood up and walked towards Ghost while talking to everyone. Go and have a rest for a while. I'll keep an eye on it. We still have to work at night, so we must stay alert. Okay. *5. Chapter 231 Operation Codename. Keep Quiet 2. The sun gradually turned into a golden duck egg yolk and disappeared below the horizon. The light of human technology took over the work of the sun and began to provide light for those poor workers. Sherlock, who had been broken for an afternoon, also woke up. After taking a shower in the bathroom, he wiped his hair while staring at the AIM building opposite, which was still brightly lit. He couldn't help but be amazed. How should I put it? I haven't felt such a big resentment for a long time. Sure enough, the resentment of the workers who work overtime is even stronger than that of the evil spirits. However, Sherlock's 5 uncles were not as sentimental as Sherlock. After all, as soldiers, and a small group of the top soldiers, their work was not only full of danger, but also more tiring than that of the workers. Not to mention overtime. Sometimes it is not uncommon for a task to be worked for several days and nights, but they also have a lot of time to rest. In this comparison, the workers can be said to be the most miserable group in the world. Unlike the brightly lit AIM building across the street, no lights were on in the apartment. Except for the occasional flickering lights, there was only the faint light from Gates' computer screen. As time passed, the bright moon gradually rose, covering the light of the stars, and the lights in the AIM building across the street began to turn off one after another. The workers could finally welcome the happiest time of the day, off work. Although the workers were off work, it also meant that Sherlock and his 5 uncles were going to start working. Watching the AIM building across the street go from brightly lit at the beginning to dark now, with only the height indicator lights flashing. The entire building became like a cage made of steel and concrete in the dead of night, trapping the danger and darkness inside. Ghost and Price were also freed from the telescope and sniper rifle, and they had about a few hours of rest time. Of course, the two would not be idle during this rest time, and began to install infrared and night vision equipment on their guns to provide vision. Soap, Xiao and Sherlock were also packing their equipment, checking them over and over again. The equipment they were wearing was all the best. The 4i night vision goggles alone were worth $60,000, not to mention the other equipment on the 3 of them. After everyone had packed up, Price laid out a floor plan of the AIM building on the coffee table and began to speak. According to our observations over the past few days, the AIM building has more than 40 floors in total, and AIM only occupies the middle 5 floors. Most of the lower floors are jobs for ordinary employees, which are not very meaningful. Our main purpose is concentrated between floors 30 and 32. Based on our observations over the past 2 days, these 2 floors are most likely the offices of senior executives, and there must be some intelligence we need in them. Above that is the 33rd floor. There is a high probability that there is an AIM server room on the 33rd floor, but according to our observations, this server room is only used for administrative purposes here, and there is not much significance in obtaining intelligence, but we can't let it go. After all, we don't know the architecture of AIM. And maybe the servers here will have an encrypted link with the servers in the AIM laboratory, so our purpose is very simple. When he said this, Price pointed to an office on the floor plan and continued. First, the personnel office. We need to obtain the information files of all employees in the entire AIM company. This is undoubtedly a good intelligence point. AIM is very cunning. Computers above the supervisor level can only connect to the internal LAN. Since the server is physically disconnected from the outside, Gates has no way to invade, so it depends on your manual operation. Second, the customer management office. This place has almost all of AIM's customer information, most likely including orders with the Department of Defense, as well as those illegal customer groups that caused explosions, so this is also your target point. The third is the server room. Gates hopes to connect to the server to see if he can find the location of AIM's laboratory from it. If that happens, we will save a lot of trouble. As Price finished speaking, Gates took out two things, one large and one small, that looked like USB flash drives from his arms, and put them on the coffee table. There are two intrusion USB drives I made. One is that it can run autonomously, just by plugging it into the computer port. This is the small one. You can ignore it in the computer room. If you do it in a concealed way, it will be hard to find any clues. But the other two officers need you to recover the USB drive. And during the period when the USB drive is intruding and storing information, you cannot unplug it, or it will trigger an alarm. So you need to stay where you are and wait for the USB drive to be read. It will take about 5 minutes. After seeing Gates explain his situation, Price nodded and continued. During this period, the only people you need to pay attention to are the night patrol security guards of AIM. According to my observation, the security of the entire building is provided by the security personnel of AIM. In other words, although AIM does not occupy the entire building, security is an exception. Moreover, the security of the night shift is different from that of the day shift. They all seem to have received certain military training. As he spoke, Price took out a dozen photos from his arms and threw them on the coffee table for everyone to see. The photos showed security guards wearing bulletproof vests and holding the same P90 submachine guns. After everyone saw the photos, Price continued. AIM's security is very tight. All patrol teams appear in pairs, and they can complete a patrol every half an hour. Among them, the patrol related to AIM is the most strict, with about 4 shifts patrolling in groups of 2. This means that you must keep a low profile. If an exchange of fire occurs, you will only have about 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, you will face the pursuit of the security guards of the entire building. And one thing to note is that the security guards on the AIM company's floor are most likely those little firemen who can explode. So if you have an exchange of fire, you must ensure that you kill them with one shot. If an explosion occurs, it will also attract the pursuit of security guards from the entire building. Ghost and I will be here to provide you with support and vision. Pay attention to safety. This operation is simple, but also very dangerous. I don't want to not feel your body temperature when I see you. Do you understand? Understood **5 Seeing that everyone nodded, Plas nodded with satisfaction, raised his wrist and said, check your watches now. The time is 11 hours, 20 minutes and 45 seconds now. We will start the operation at 1 o'clock. Soap, Zioki and Sherlock can go to the rooftop to prepare. Check the communication after you are in place. Price paused for a moment before speaking to Sherlock. Rookie, you must remember what I said. Unless necessary, don't use your little tricks. You must listen to Soap's instructions throughout the process and don't make any mistakes. Yes, what could Sherlock do in the face of Price's instructions? Of course, he agreed weakly. After all, even now Sherlock could feel that more than one pair of eyes were watching them. Sherlock certainly wouldn't give these people any handle. Chapter 232 Operation Codename, Keep It a Secret 3. After Soap, Zioki and Sherlock had been on the rooftop for more than an hour, Price's voice finally rang through their headsets. Test, communication test, received. Sherlock received. Communication is normal. Soap received. Communication is normal. Zioki received. Communication is normal. Ghost received. Communication is normal. Gates received. Communication is normal. After everyone responded to Price's call, Price, who was still in the room, nodded with satisfaction and continued. Sherlock, remember your code name as Rookie. You are forbidden to use your real name during combat. As Price's voice fell, Sherlock's face suddenly turned sour. Soap and Xiao Qiang patted Sherlock's shoulders with a smile on their faces, and Xiao Qiang even stabbed him with a knife. Get used to it, we all got through this in the past. After saying that, he hid in the corner and laughed non-stop. Sherlock said that he didn't want to pay any attention to these old men, who were making fun of him, but Price in the headset was still roaring. Rookie, did you get it? Reply. Yes, Rookie got it. Sherlock's answer was weak. He couldn't understand why he, who had fought aliens, worked for SHIELD, and even visited the god's domain, and was known as the most mysterious and powerful Avenger, would become a rookie in front of this group of people. After hearing Sherlock's weak answer, a suppressed low laugh sounded in the headset. After a long while, Price continued. Okay, the lively atmosphere ends here, and the action will begin in 1 minute. With the issuance of Price's order, the communication channel returned to silence in an instant. Soap, who was on standby on the roof, began to direct Sherlock and Xiao Qiang to fix the rope gun. As 3 large boxes containing rope guns were opened, 3 rope guns about 1 person tall appeared on the roof. After adjusting the angle, with Price's words, the action began. 3 alloy hooks with ropes were launched to the roof of the building opposite like a sharp sword. After a mechanical sound, the rope was tightened. After testing the firmness of the rope one by one, Soap ordered everyone to prepare for the rope crossing. After Sherlock fixed the safety buckle, he picked up the climber next to him and fixed it on the rope. After Soap gave an order, the 3 people quickly came to the rooftop of the AIM building along the rope like ghosts in the air. After quickly untying the rope, the 3 people immediately began to guard the surroundings according to the formation. Soap took the lead, Xiao Qiang, and Sherlock was the last. After all, Sherlock was the rookie, so naturally he could only work after getting the point that only needed to be paid attention to. In fact, it was not that Sherlock's ability was not strong, but that it was the first time for him to perform a mission with everyone in 141, and what was lacking was teamwork. In order to prevent the failure of the mission caused by the Oolong incident, it would be better to let Sherlock go on the mission as a rookie. The 3 of them quickly came to the door of the escape passage on the roof. Xiao Qiang, the central defender, took out a very sophisticated card from Soap's backpack, which looked like a chip, and swiped it on the card reader on the top floor. In an instant, the locked rooftop door was opened by Xiao Qiang. As the door opened, Xiao Qiang gently patted Soap's shoulder in front of him. Soap carefully opened the door of the rooftop, and the 3 of them entered one after another. Behind the door of the rooftop was a dark and closed fire escape. Along the way, the 3 of them moved forward carefully and lightly in the CQB formation, fearing that any noise would attract the guards on other floors. Sherlock paid attention to the movement behind him and secretly complained in his heart. This was because he was particularly concerned about CQB when he was receiving training because of movies and games. The training results were also the best among all the subjects arranged by Price. Otherwise, he might not be able to adapt to the current situation now. I dare not say anything else. Just the sensor lights in the corridor. If you have not been trained, it will be easy to activate. If you are discovered by the careful guard, then this mission can be said to be dead before you even start. The 3 of them slowly moved forward in the dark corridor. With the help of night vision goggles, it was not difficult. However, it is worth mentioning that AIM is also very cunning. The entire building has 40 floors, 33 floors belong to AIM, and there is no door to the fire escape between 31 to 33 floors. In other words, only the office area of the ground floor employees on the 30th floor has a door to the fire escape. Sherlock was madly complaining about AIM in his heart. He could only say that it was worthy of being a company that could research the extremis virus. Did they really stick to the word extremis? I don't know how the fire department passed the review. What if there is a fire or something like that? All the executives who know about it have to experience the company's flagship product, extremis. After Sherlock sighed for the nth time that AIM was a black-hearted factory, the 3 of them gradually reached the 31st floor. As long as they went down one more floor, they would see the fire escape of AIM on the 30th floor. But at this moment, Soap stopped everyone's progress with a gesture. After cooperating with Xiao Qiang to fix the sensor lights in the corridor, Soap reported quietly in the communication channel. "Colonel, we have arrived at the designated location." After a while, Price's voice also sounded in the communication. "Received. I have seen you in the infrared imaging, and I'm marking and sharing it with Ghost. Ghost and I will help you keep an eye on the enemy when you enter AIM. The job of guiding the route is left to Gates." After Price's voice fell, Gates' voice also sounded in the communication channel, and then said, "I will be responsible for showing you the way. When you are ready, tell me. I will work with the Red Queen to tamper with the surveillance in real time to ensure that you will not be discovered by the people in the monitoring room. Got it?" Soap replied and gestured for everyone to continue moving forward, but Sherlock had just stood up when Price's voice sounded again in the communication. "Stand by. Repeat. Stand by. 2 guards are heading for the fire escape." As Price's words appeared, Soap and Xiao Qiang immediately stopped moving forward. The two raised their guns and aimed at the corridor leading to the 30th floor, while Sherlock was still on guard upstairs to prevent his team from being robbed. The three did not wait too long. About 30 seconds later, accompanied by the sound of a door opening, the sound of 2 leather boots hitting the ground appeared in the corridor. At the same time as the sound of the 2 leather boots appeared, the sensor lights on the 30th floor also lit up quickly. Sherlock even saw the warm yellow light through the gap between the stairs. "You go up, and I'll go down. Let's take a quick walk, and then go back to sleep after our shift." A strange voice sounded, and a person seemed to start walking upstairs. The sound of leather boots hitting the ground was getting closer and closer, and Sherlock's heartbeat was getting faster and faster. Anyway, even though Sherlock felt that his back was about to be wet with cold sweat, he still stared at the passage upstairs due to his duty, and did not even look at the passage leading to the downstairs. But sometimes, the less you look, the more worried and nervous you become. As the sound of leather boots got closer and closer, Sherlock even felt that his heart was about to jump out of his throat. Snap, 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 snap. The sound of leather boots hitting the ground was like a life-threatening sound, strangely synchronized with Sherlock's heartbeat, getting closer and closer. Chapter 233 Operation Codename, Keep It a Secret 4. Just as the footsteps were getting closer and closer, and when both Soap and Xiao Qiang had their hands on the trigger ready to shoot at any time, the strange voice sounded again. "I say, Sheffield, that's enough. Hurry up. I want to go back to sleep. No one will come here in the middle of the night except ghosts. What's more, there is an alarm on the door. Which idiot would come here to do stupid things? If you have the mind, go to the Apple store and the supermarket to buy for free. The harvest will definitely be faster than robbing here." After hearing this voice, the guy named Sheffield paused, then sighed helplessly, and turned to walk downstairs. Hearing the footsteps getting farther and farther away, Sherlock was relieved. After all, according to the footsteps of the guy named Sheffield just now, as long as he turned around on the upper half of the floor, he would probably see the three of them. Sherlock even heard the sigh of Sheffield clearly. You can imagine how close he is to him. Wait. Sheffield? What the hell? I said, why this name is so familiar. So, during this period, Lao Z did not go to work at the Ministry of National Defense, but came here to be a security guard? Well, he is a security guard who plays a villain. It can only be said that Lao Z's development is extremely stable. With the sound of the metal door closing, the entire corridor returned to peace in an instant. After waiting for a while, after all the sensor lights in the corridor were turned off, Price said to the three people in the communication, "Keep going, they are already far away from you." After receiving Price's order, Soap made a gesture, and the three-person team began to move forward vigilantly again. It only took a short while to reach the entrance of the fire escape. Soap and Xiao Qiang, each on one side, firmly grasped both sides of the door, and Sherlock followed Xiao Qiang and paid attention to the movements downstairs and upstairs. Soap continued to report to Price in the communication at this time. "We are in place and are about to enter the enemy-occupied area." After hearing Soap's report, Price also quickly answered Soap's call. "Received." There are no enemies behind the gate, but you have to move faster. There are only 3 minutes left before the next wave of patrols will come out of the lounge. Command is immediately handed over to Gates. Received. 30-second countdown. When the countdown ends, the surveillance screen will be blocked 24, 23, 22, 21. Hearing Gates' countdown, Xiaoqi Yang quickly took out a device from his arms and attached it to the top of the gate. The device was magnetic and had a small red light flashing on it. After Xiaoqi Yang attached it to the gate, the small red light quickly turned green in less than 3 seconds. Seeing the small light turn green, Xiaoqi Yang nodded to Soap. As Gates' countdown ended, Soap carefully opened the door to the office. Well, it was silent, without any alarm. Sherlock didn't know until this time that the thing Xiaoqi Yang attached was most likely a shielding device for an alarm. Seeing that the alarm was ineffective, Soap became much bolder. He opened the door very quickly but still silently and gestured to Xiaoqi Yang to move forward. Xiaoqi Yang patted Sherlock's body with his backhand to signal him to follow and then entered the door with a gun in hand. After seeing Sherlock enter, Soap followed in with a flash and closed the door quietly. Behind the door was a reception desk that looked very high-tech. There was a small door next to the reception desk. Gates' voice rang at this time. Bypass the reception desk. There is a large cubicle office area that can be used as a cover to avoid patrol officers. You have 2 minutes. After hearing Gates' words, Xiaoqi Yang quickly quickened his pace, and the three of them sneaked into the office of AIM Company like ghosts in the night. After bypassing the reception desk, it was indeed as Gates said, a large cubicle. Xiaoqi Yang ducked Sherlock and quickly went around to the other side of the cubicle and hid at the other end. Because of the size of the cubicle, it could only barely cover Sherlock and Xiaoqi Yang, so Soap did not hide with them, but disappeared, and no one knew where he hid. And the reason why he hid at the other end instead of hiding in the cubicle was actually for a reason. After all, there were 2 inspectors. If someone was interested in checking the cubicle, then hiding in the cubicle might not even have a way to escape. Everything should leave room for yourself. This was the first sentence that Price told Sherlock when Sherlock was trained by Price and others. Not long after the two hid, the voice of Ghost also sounded in the communication. I see you. Don't be nervous, rookie. I'm watching you. Ghost's words made Sherlock roll his eyes fiercely. To be honest, if it wasn't for the performance for others, Sherlock would probably be here as a Ghost one with a cupboard. However, it should be said that the reason why Ghost reported his vision only now is actually very simple. He and Price use different imaging. Price uses infrared imaging, which can even see people hiding behind the wall, but Ghost uses night vision equipment. This is also to have a backup. The two imaging equipment complement each other, share markers, and prevent accidental injuries. As soon as Ghost's teasing voice fell, Sherlock heard the sound of a door lock turning. The next second, 2 footsteps came from the front desk. Damn, I have to patrol again. Mike, come to my house after tonight. I just found a good movie. We can watch it together. Fuck, I don't have the idea of flying with you, but you can lend it to me after you finish watching it. 2 unfamiliar voices revealed a vulgar atmosphere, starting from far away and approaching, and accompanied by these 2 figures, there were also 2 dazzling flashlights. In just a few breaths, the flashlight light began to sweep into the large cubicle where Sherlock and his friends were hiding. Sherlock also began to get nervous, and his fingers wearing tactical gloves gently placed on the trigger. Of course, he was still praying that these 2 wretched patrolmen could quickly get the job done and get away from them. But things did not go as planned. Despite their wretched temperament and constant dirty jokes, these 2 patrolmen still had a sense of responsibility. Sherlock almost listened eagerly as the footsteps got closer and closer to him. Between each cubicle, this guy would pause for a moment. If he guessed correctly, this guy was probably checking each cubicle one by one to see if there was anyone hiding. Unlike Sherlock's nervousness, Xiaoqi Yang seemed to have anticipated such a thing. He patted Sherlock with his backhand, motioning Sherlock to follow. Before Sherlock could react at all, he crouched down and led Sherlock and the patrolman to play the king around the pillar game. Chapter 234 Operation Codename, Keep Quiet 5. I have to say that Xiao Qiang's strategy of going around the pillar is simple, but it is really useful. With the help of dim light and a large number of cubicles, the two guards who only relied on flashlight beams for lighting did not notice Xiao Qiang and Sherlock. Of course, this tactic is not without its shortcomings. The biggest disadvantage is that it is too stimulating. People with low psychological tolerance really can't play this routine. Can you imagine that Sherlock was less than 2 meters away from the patrolling guard? Sherlock even dared to swear that he heard the guards breathing at that time, not to mention the flashlight beam that swept past Sherlock's head several times. I can only say that none of my 5 uncles are really simple. Each of them has some unique skills, and at the very least, they are also the owners of a big heart. Although there is a very responsible guard, fortunately, the other guard is not so responsible. The guard who checked the cubicles only checked 2 rows, and the other began to urge impatiently. It seemed that he didn't want to stay here any longer, and he kept urging him. The responsible guard seemed to be no match for the irresponsible guard, and in the end he only checked 2 rows before being hurriedly pulled away by another person. It was not until the 2 flashlight beams disappeared completely and the whole office returned to silence that Sherlock finally breathed a sigh of relief. To be honest, this was much more exciting than the stealth level when he played the game. Seeing the guard leave, Xiao Qiang turned around with a smile and gave Sherlock a thumbs up, meaning a verbal praise and continued efforts. Sherlock wiped his forehead, not knowing whether it was cold sweat or the sweat from the series of tactical actions such as crawling, squatting, and rolling, and rolled his eyes at Xiao Qiang. Just when Sherlock wanted to say something, a big hand quietly patted Sherlock on the shoulder. That's right, it was silent. Sherlock didn't even react to the person behind him. He subconsciously wanted to fight back. His body's reaction was even faster than his brain, and he elbowed back. As expected, Sherlock's elbow was blocked by 2 sturdy arms. A familiar and deliberately suppressed voice sounded behind Sherlock. "It's me, Soap. What are you doing, brat? Are you trying to rebel against the heavens?" After hearing Soap's voice, Sherlock remembered Soap who had just disappeared. He put on an embarrassed smile and turned back to smile at Soap. After all, he was too nervous just now. He was so nervous that Sherlock even forgot that Soap was here. The two of them only fought for a moment, so naturally, they couldn't hide it from Price, who was observing with Infra on the opposite side. Before Sherlock could explain anything, Price's voice rang in the communication. "Rookie, it seems that you have almost forgotten the stealth skills I taught you. After this incident is over, you must train me in stealth for a week. If there were no enemies near you now, your move just now would have caused your team to be discovered." After hearing Price's words, Sherlock's smile quickly disappeared and was replaced by a bitter face. That was Price. Price's training, well, only those who practice it know it. If you don't die, you will lose a layer of skin. Looking at Sherlock with a bitter face, Soap patted Sherlock's shoulder with a gloating look and came to the front of the team again and then whispered, "Come on, the enemy is in front of us now and their lounge is behind us. You must pay extra attention. Gates, continue to show us the way." After hearing Soap's call, Gates' reply soon rang in the communication. "Continue along the passage, you will see a staircase. Above the staircase are the middle level offices of supervisors and managers at all levels. The rest area, entertainment area and kitchen for employees are here. Unlike the cubicles you see now, the middle level is composed of independent offices, and the rest area is also an open space, so you need to find a way to pass quickly without attracting anyone's attention. Got it?" As Gates finished his introduction, Soap quickly organized Xiao Qiang and Sherlock and continued to move forward in a standard CQB formation, but this time everyone's attention was mostly focused on the front and back, and the 2 wings were a little relaxed. Just as Gates said, at the end of the cubicle was a staircase made of white marble. The 3 of them began to move up the stairs little by little, clinging to the wall. Just when the few people were about to reach the end of the stairs, the voice of Ghost sounded in the communication and stopped the 3 people. "Stand alert. I have some bad news for you. The 2 patrolmen you met in the cubicle are in the lounge. They seem to be chatting and slacking off. You need to wait. Damn it. Rookie, pay attention to the back. Xiao Qiang, switch positions with me. Pay attention to the front. As Ghost's voice fell, Soap quickly arranged the formation and began to observe the configuration inside the 31st floor. Above the stairs is a spacious corridor. On the side of the corridor are independent offices made of glass. The doors of the offices also have everyone's position and name. On the other side, there is a wide open space. The decoration of the open space is obviously different from the glassroom office opposite. It looks more lively. There are lazy sofas, treadmills, and some board games. At the end, there is an open kitchen and a huge refrigerator. At this time, the two guards were talking and laughing in the kitchen and drinking coffee. Such a layout made Soap's scalp itchy. There was no way to pass quickly without alerting the guards. Just when Soap was struggling to decide whether to find a way to deal with the enemy or wait a little longer, an even worse news reached the ears of the three people through Price's mouth. There is bad news. Two more guards came out of the lounge. They seem to be another group of patrol personnel. You don't have much time. As Price's voice fell, Soap could no longer wait and began to call Gates on the communication. Gates, see if there are other routes. We don't have time. Everyone, pay attention. Prepare to open fire in 1 minute. As Soap's order was issued, two auroras that could only be seen in night vision goggles were firmly locked on the heads of the two guards who were drinking coffee and idling. The crotches of the two sniper rifles far across the building were also firmly locked on the heads of the two guards who had just come out of the lounge. It seemed that a war was about to break out. Chapter 235 Operation Codename, Keep It a Secret 6. Sherlock's head began to sweat. He held the Honey Badger assault rifle in his hand and locked onto the space downstairs. According to the rules, Sherlock would dodge out as soon as the gun was fired to ensure that the two guards downstairs were killed thoroughly. But there was one thing. Once Price and Ghost opened fire, the shattering of the curtain wall glass outside the building would inevitably attract the attention of the guards still in the lounge. At that time, it might not be an infiltration operation, but a direct assault. Sherlock even heard the exciting soundtrack unique to Call of Duty, as if the war was about to begin in the next second. Fortunately, Gates was still very reliable. In less than 10 seconds, Gates gave a solution to this situation. Wait a minute. Wait a minute, Soap. There should be a gap on the top of your head. That is the inspection port of the ventilation duct. You can go directly to the 32nd floor through this duct. As Gates' voice sounded, Sherlock and the other two raised their heads in unison. Gates was right. There was still a cover the size of a person on the top of the three people's heads. But the problem was that this cover was definitely more than 2 meters away from the three people. It was undoubtedly a pipe dream to go up by oneself. At this moment, Soap began to struggle in his mind whether to open fire or try to get on the ventilation duct. Fortunately, Soap was not a person who wasted time. He made a quick decision and turned to the two people and said, "Rookie, you come and pay attention to the movements of the two bastards who are slacking off upstairs. Ziokiang, give me a hand. I will try to see if I can get up first." Goyle and Crab are two good friends who grew up together. They were born in Queens and have been unexpectedly compatible since childhood. When they were in school, they were two little hooligans who were a headache for the school. After graduation, they failed to get into college because of their grades and became one of the idle people on the street. The turning point came when they were about to join a large local gang. On the way there, they saw a small leader being shot to death in the car. At that moment, they knew that if they continued on this path, it was very likely that the next person to die in the car would be them. The two men who had changed their ways decided to turn over a new leaf, and the best way for the lower class people to get ahead was to join the army. It happened that Dengta was facing the preliminary preparations for the Gulf War at this time. In this way, before the Gulf War, the two of them almost signed up for the army at the same time, and were lucky enough to be assigned to the same team. But their luck was not so good. After completing the recruit training, they were directly pulled onto the battlefield. They were lucky to win the first battle, but the goddess of luck seemed to pay attention to them again. Under the attack of a mortar shell, the two teams were almost wiped out, and only the two of them were lucky enough to escape. Although they did not die, both of them had their limbs amputated because of the shell. Gore lost his right arm and Crab lost his left leg. The disabled people would not continue to serve. All they got in exchange for one arm and one leg were 2 bronze medals that could be sold for $20, a 5-figure resettlement fee, and a service certificate. The two returned to their home in Queens, but compared to joining the army, they lived a worse life. After returning from the army, especially after the resettlement fee was spent, their lives became tight again. It's not that they didn't try hard. They wanted to make a fuss, or at least arrange a job to make a living. But fate just likes to play tricks on people. The years they served in the army did not meet the preferential policy for disabled soldiers. After all, they were injured and retired during their first mission. The two people who were desperate couldn't even apply for security guards. No one wanted 2 disabled security guards. Crab and Goyle were increasingly desperate about life in such an atmosphere, and at this time, people from AIM came to them and said that they could treat their disabled bodies. The two people in the abyss of despair would never miss such an opportunity, especially in the AIM laboratory. They looked at their lost right arms and left legs and cried with joy and directly regarded AIM as a light in their lives. Killian, who made the extremis virus, was like a savior to the two. The two swore allegiance to Killian without any hesitation, and Killian was not vague. After a series of assessments, he directly made the 2 security guards of the AIM building. And because of Killian's focus, the extremis virus of the two was different from that of other people. If other people use the extremis virus, they might really become bombers. But the two had no side effects at all. For Killian, the two were also a nail planted in the security of AIM, which could monitor the loyalty of his security personnel very well. It just so happened that there were only 2 people on duty tonight. Unlike the 2 people who were slacking off before, Crab and Goyle were very responsible. They would carefully check every cubicle. As the two gradually approached the marble staircase leading to the upper level, Crab still heard a sound that was a little different from usual. Goyle, did you hear any strange noises? It felt like the sound of a plasterboard breaking. Hearing Crab's voice on the other side, Goyle, who was checking the cubicle on the other side, raised his head, shone the flashlight in Crab's direction, shook his head, and then continued. I didn't hear it. Don't think about taking so much. Check it quickly, so that we can continue to go up. Those 2 bastards, Trevor and Mike, don't have any sense of responsibility. I don't know how these 2 bastards joined Mr. Killian's company. After hearing Goyle's words, Crab's head immediately appeared with the 2 extremely wretched faces of Trevor and Mike. He shook his head helplessly and continued to check the cubicles. The 2 were very fast. In just a short while, they checked all the cubicles and walked towards the marble staircase. As expected, they saw Mike and Trevor slacking off on the 31st floor. But what neither of them noticed was that a corner of the plaster cover of the ventilation system inspection passage above their heads was missing. In that missing corner, a green light spot was staring at the top of their heads. After seeing that, the two did not notice anything. They slowly disappeared into the darkness. Chapter 236 Operation Code, No Sound 7. Sherlock, who had already climbed up to the ventilation duct, almost watched the 2 guards walk towards the 2 guards who were slacking off on the 31st floor with angry looks. To be honest, all this really fits Sherlock's imagination of Call of Duty, but after this wave of actual experience, Sherlock still said it was too exciting. Just as the 2 guards were checking the cubicle, Soap and Zero Kiang built a ladder, allowing Soap, who was on top, to finally climb up the hole that was the size of a person. Soap dropped the rope as soon as he entered the inspection port of the ventilation duct, and Zero Kiang climbed into the hole very quickly along the rope like a monkey. Sherlock was left alone. It was not that Sherlock did not want to climb, but that Sherlock could not climb at all. During the original training, Sherlock's rope climbing was a mess. Even Price did not reach the passing line in his mind. No matter how he trained, he was still like this. Price's evaluation of this was that a rotten wood cannot be carved. To be honest, Sherlock was raised by Price. If it was someone else, he would either be sent back to his hometown by Price, or be counted as disabled and shot. Sherlock failed the rope climbing test before, not to mention Sherlock, who is now focusing on magic and has not trained for a long time. But it happened that the 2 guards who came out this time were very responsible and spent a lot of time checking each cubicle, which gave Sherlock an opportunity He quickly tied the rope around his waist and was pulled up by Soap and Zhao. Despite this, the whole process was enough to make people feel adrenaline rushing. First of all, there were the two guards who were slacking off at the end of the 31st floor. If they heard any sound, they could see Sherlock and his group climbing up the stairwell with a flashlight. Secondly, the three of them needed to be as careful as possible and not leave any flaws. You should know that the decoration of the lighthouse is actually very fragile in many cases, except for the structures like ventilation ducts and high-rise buildings, which are hard. The hard decoration parts of the room are basically piled up with pieces of gypsum boards or wooden boards. Just like this time, the entire ceiling is actually made of pieces of gypsum boards. As for gypsum boards, anyone who has done home decoration probably knows that they are brittle and easy to fall apart. Basically, they can break into countless pieces with just a slight bend. The most important thing is that the ceilings here are different from those in China. The ceilings here are all interlocking structures. Basically, if you break a piece, the entire ceiling may collapse. Therefore, the three of them have to be careful. But even with such caution, when Sherlock was pulled up by Soap and Zhao, he accidentally broke a corner of the gypsum board that served as the hidden cover of the vent inspection port. This is not Sherlock's fault. After all, the gypsum board is where the gypsum board is. As soon as he climbs up, and Sherlock completely accidentally crushed a corner with his knee. But the sound of the plasterboard breaking still made the three of them alert, and they didn't even dare to move. This is also the origin of Crabs hearing the sound of the plasterboard breaking when checking the cubicle. Fortunately, with Goyle's invisible cover, this matter was barely fooled, and Sherlock and his team were not discovered. The good infiltration mission became a breakthrough mission. Everything in the world is actually connected by coincidences. For example, this time, although the plasterboard was broken, Sherlock was still very responsible to move the plasterboard with a missing corner back to its original position. Even Sherlock's hand didn't completely let go of the plasterboard, and the responsible Crab and Goyle had already stepped onto the stairs. If the two had been a few seconds earlier, they would probably have discovered a dark hole the size of a person on the ceiling. But now, it was just a missing corner, which was really difficult to be discovered in the dark night. Seeing that no one had discovered the traces of the three of them, Soap no longer hesitated, and began to take the lead and slowly crawl forward in the small ventilation duct, since they had to be more cautious than before. After all, the ventilation duct was made of a square thin iron sheet. If there was a little noise, it would be no different from a tin drum. And the most important thing was that there were 4 enemies under the three of them. The three of them were very careful along the way. Sherlock swore that he had never experienced such an uncomfortable crawling. It was only a distance of dozens of meters, but Sherlock even felt like he had been crawling for a century. Even though the air in this ventilation duct was not as stuffy as in the movie, but unusually cool, it could not stop Sherlock from sweating all over. It took the three of them more than half an hour to climb to the end silently. At the end was a vent located above the kitchen. Through the grill, you can even see the tops of the heads of the 2 guards who were still slacking off and drinking coffee, and you can also hear the dirty jokes in their mouths. But it was obvious that the 3 people in the ventilation duct had no intention of listening to the gossip about women between the 2, because there was another problem in front of them. On the grill, there was a 90-degree vertical pipe leading to the upper floors, and near the middle, there was a silent fan that was constantly turning. With this thing, it was undoubtedly a fantasy for the 3 to pass through. FXXK, FXXK, FXXK. Looking at the constantly turning fan blades above, he cursed for no reason and decisively reported to Gates and Price. At this moment, Gates and Price were silent. The reason was very simple. The only thing Gates could do now was to stop the fan, but stopping the fan did not mean that there was enough space for the 3 to pass through. In other words, the 3 were stuck here now. There were only 2 ways in front of Soap. Either wait quietly in the ventilation duct for the 2 slacking bastards below to get out, or jump down and start a big fight. Sherlock also heard the conversation between Soap, Price, and Gates. Sherlock naturally knew the 2 options Soap was facing. After thinking for a long time, Sherlock said carefully in the communication, "Well, maybe there is a 3rd option." After hearing Sherlock's words, Price subconsciously wanted to refute. Stinky boy, I've already said that countless eyes are watching. Before he finished speaking, Price himself was stunned because the three of them were now in the ventilation duct. Not to mention the night vision goggles. Even Price's own infrared imaging could hardly see the situation of Soap and the other two. If it weren't for the initial positioning, Price would probably have to spend a long time to determine where the three were now. And Price's inability to see it meant one thing, that it was impossible for other people who were observing their actions to see Soap and the others. After a while, Price sighed helplessly and said in the communication, "Okay, rookie, just this once, you make the decision. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 237 Operation Codename, Keep It to Yourself 8. After hearing Price finally give in, Sherlock would have jumped up in excitement if he hadn't been in the ventilation duct. He dared not say anything else, but Sherlock had always believed that, if he could use his magic, this mission would definitely be much easier. He cursed those damned observers in his heart again. If it weren't for them, Killian and Dame would probably have been scattered to ashes by Sherlock. After silently drawing a circle in his heart to curse them for the nth time, Sherlock put the matter behind him and slowly retreated with Zhao Qiang and Soap. This was to ensure that when Sherlock used magic, the special light effect would not attract the attention of the two fools below. Although the probability was also very small, it was still necessary to guard against it. The three of them slowly retreated to the middle position. Sherlock, who was at the back, turned over and turned his hand. Two flying brooms appeared in Sherlock's hands. Sherlock remained lying flat and slowly passed the flying brooms in his hand to Zhao Qiang and Soap in front of him. Looking at the beautifully shaped broom that Sherlock handed over, the two of them had a lot of questions in their heads, but they still took it obediently. Seeing that both of them had taken it, Sherlock asked Gates to stop the damn electric fan in the communication, and then he took out a broom of the same model and held it in his arms. Then, with Zhao Qiang and Soap's expressions of "Are you crazy?" he took out his wand and smiled at the two of them, which he thought was very kind. But this smile was not so kind in the eyes of Soap and Zhao Qiang. It should be called nuclear kindness. Sherlock didn't care about the activities in their hearts. He shook his wand lightly, and two consecutive rays of light hit Zhao Qiang in front of him. After being hit by Sherlock's magic, Zhao Qiang holding the flying broom began to shrink slowly under Soap's horrified gaze. Before Soap could say anything, Sherlock's magic followed and hit Soap, and Soap also began to shrink slowly. Then Sherlock shot himself 2 more times without any hesitation. 3 men with an average height of 1.88 meters were made to look like 3 remote control cars by Sherlock in the ventilation duct of a Verlaine company. The originally crowded passageway became spacious at this moment, and even allowed 3 people to stand up. Soap and Zhao Qiang were even more surprised, and kept checking themselves. Although they knew that Sherlock had some magical abilities, this was their first time to experience Sherlock's magic in person. It was really magical. Zhao Qiang and Soap, who were well informed, felt it was magical. Price and others in the communication were listening to Soap and Zhao Qiang constantly sighing about the magic in the communication. To be honest, they were also very itchy and wanted to know what was going on over there. However, because they were still on a mission, the 3 of them had their own missions, so they had to suppress their curiosity for the time being and continue to perform their missions without saying a word. Compared with the seriousness of Price, the atmosphere of the 3 people on Sherlock's side was undoubtedly much better. Because of the shrinking of their bodies, the same sound was also reduced, and the communication between the few people did not need to suppress their voices. At least they can return to normal. Their voices plus the reduced distance, even if the 2 idiots really heard them, they would probably think it was a mouse or something. Looking at Zhao Qiang and Soap, who were experiencing magic for the first time, they were excited to touch and look left and right, and kept checking their bodies. Sherlock rolled his eyes helplessly. It is hard to imagine how they would react if they were told that a few decades ago there was a guy named Pime who could do this with technology, and even later there would be a guy nicknamed Ant-Man on the road who could shrink to the quantum realm, helplessly stopping the exploration of the too curious babies. Sherlock gave them a unique flying broom lesson in this ventilation duct. The two of them also completely understood why Sherlock rolled his eyes when Price said that magic was not allowed. Damn, if I had such ability, I would roll my eyes too. After all, Sherlock's magic is too magical. Even Xiao Qiang and Soap both felt that if Sherlock relied on himself, this task would definitely be completed very easily. At the same time, the two of them had a general understanding of Sherlock's magic. Not to mention, after the two of them discussed it, they could be sure of one thing. Their skills might not be much different from those of children in Sherlock's place. If Sherlock was serious, let alone his own people, even if an army was transferred, even if the people in it were elites trained according to the quality of these people, it would probably not be enough for Sherlock to fight. If they wanted to kill Sherlock completely, the best way would probably be to detonate a nuclear bomb near him before he could react. At least that's how Soap and Xiao Qiang felt. After about 5 minutes of emergency training from Sherlock, Xiao Qiang and Soap, who were originally all-rounders, quickly mastered the use of the flying broom. This thing is much simpler than flying a plane. For Xiao Qiang and Soap, the difficulty of operating this thing is about the same as driving a baby carriage, and it is completely a fool's operation. With Sherlock's magic blessing, the originally difficult task suddenly became simple, thanks to the fact that the flying broom is completely silent when flying. If they were not afraid of attracting attention, they could have sung all the way to the target room on the 32nd floor. In fact, they did just that. Although they did not sing along the way, under such convenient conditions, the three of them still easily came to the vent above the hours manager's office under Gates' guidance. Through the observation of the vent, the few people quickly saw the layout of the so-called high-level office. It can only be said that there is nothing wrong with the workers wanting to get a promotion. The salary increase is another matter. The office environment alone is pleasing to the eye. Unlike the glass house office on the 31st floor, the decoration of the high-level office on the 32nd floor is undoubtedly much more luxurious, and it even looks not much different from the decoration of an ordinary home. Sofas, wardrobes, independent water bars, and even a screen. There is also a recliner behind the screen for the owner of the office to rest. If it weren't for the luxurious desk, no one would have thought that this would actually be an office. Even the walls were no longer glass rooms that could be seen at a glance, but normal walls. There were a few pots of green plants near the corridor, and the only connection to the outside world was a soundproof blind and a wooden door that looked expensive. It might be because of AIM's regulations that the blinds must be open after get off work for patrol inspection. But this also caused a problem, that is, the two responsible guards were patrolling on the 32nd floor at this moment. How could Sherlock and the other two recover their original bodies without alerting the guards, remove the vents in the office, jump down, open the computer, and seize the information? Chapter 238 Operation Code, Don't Tell 9. The three people chatted in the ventilation duct for a long time, and finally decided to continue to follow the original plan. After all, there are countless eyes outside staring at this place. It is really impossible for Sherlock and his party to steal chickens under the noses of these people. Don't tell Sherlock about the confusion spell. It will be more troublesome if the confusion spell is used. There is no shortage of smart people in this world. If there is any mistake, Sherlock's training ground will face countless troubles. It is purely forced by the situation. The three people are not slow characters. After simply using the host camera to spy on the office to see if there is no one, Sherlock restored the original figures of the three people in order. Of course, the flying broom was still requisitioned by Xiao Qiang and Soap, but it was temporarily placed with Sherlock. After all, such a fun and useful thing, Xiao Qiang and Soap really couldn't bear to give up. After the three people carefully opened the vents, they jumped into the hour office on the 32nd floor quietly in order. It must be said that, although AIM's behavior is a bit of a jerk, it is really willing to spend money on hardware, such as the computer of the Human Resources Steel Company. There is only a thin display screen on a modern desk, and there is no chassis or anything else. Just from the thickness of the display screen, it can be known that this thing is definitely not some junk stuff like an all-in-one computer. Before Sherlock had time to look more carefully, Soap began to arrange tasks in a low voice. "Rookie, you are young. Take this thing to deal with that computer. Zhao Qiang, you pay attention to the corridor on the left, and I pay attention to the corridor on the right. You must keep a low profile. I just checked, and the door of this office is not locked. Rookie, find a way to plug this thing into the computer and quickly find a place to hide. The patrol personnel may come to patrol at any time." Soap whispered while handing the thing in his hand that looked like a USB flash drive to Sherlock. Sherlock did not hesitate and walked towards the desk decisively. It was not until Sherlock got closer that he could see the desk clearly. Wow, Sherlock was just a wow. What kind of desk is this? Isn't this just a desktop computer? AIM is so luxurious that it customized the most advanced computer accessories for each executive. That's fine. Even the desks are customized, and the computer cases are stuffed into the desks. Sherlock has never seen such a rich man even in Tony's Stark group. Similarly, Sherlock couldn't help but sigh that AIM's wave of pure extortion is pure extortion. Not to mention this whole set, just throwing one accessory in the card bar is enough to make those garbage guys climax on the spot. And the wealthy AIM company actually uses this thing for work. Sure enough, Sherlock can't understand the world of the rich. But no matter how advanced this thing is, it is just a computer. A computer cannot escape the basic operating rules. Sherlock found the power button without any pause and pressed it. But accidents usually come very suddenly. The moment Sherlock turned on the computer, a flashlight beam also appeared in the corridor. Although it was far away from the office, where they were now, it was enough to scare Sherlock. Soap and Zhao Qiang were even more startled by the sudden flashlight beam. Their reactions were textbook-like. They squatted down the moment the beam appeared and got stuck outside the window. At the same time, Soap did not forget to desperately gesture to Sherlock, asking Sherlock to hide. Sherlock's reaction was also very fast. While Soap and Zhao Qiang were hiding, Sherlock quickly inserted the USB flash drive that Soap gave him into the USB port of the computer. Then he turned off the computer display without any hesitation, and then jumped behind the screen where the hour manager rested. Not long after Sherlock jumped behind the screen, the flashlight also came from far and near towards the office. It was the very responsible Crabbe and Goyle who came. At this moment, everyone's heart was in their throat, fearing that the two guards would see something. Maybe this was the office of the company's executives. Although Crabbe and Goyle were the boss Killian's men, they still showed enough respect to this group of people who maintained the company's operations. They did not check each cubicle like the employees below. They simply used a flashlight to scan the window and found nothing unusual and left. It was not until the footsteps of the two gradually faded away that the three people hiding in the office breathed a sigh of relief, and Gates' voice also rang at this time. It was really thrilling just now, and the mission almost failed. After hearing Gates' words, Soap almost bit his back teeth and complained in the communication. It was quite thrilling. Gates, you should have reminded us just now. Hearing Soap's complaints, Gates was also confused. He rolled his eyes fiercely while sitting in front of the computer and then said, "How do I know that there is an anti-tracking program in AIM's computer? If I hadn't been so fast, the whole building would have been alarmed." After listening to Gates' complaints, Soap was completely silent. At this moment, even if Soap was stupid, he knew that the two of them were talking about different things, but there were too many complaints about the whole conversation, and Soap didn't know how to answer for a moment. Fortunately, Price came out to smooth things over at this time. "Okay, this is my fault. There is infrared shielding material inside the office. I couldn't see the guard in the scope just now, and the ghost's night vision device didn't detect the guard because of the building's obstruction, which put you in danger." The boss had spoken, and Gates and Soap were silent. However, the two of them had been together day and night for so many years. Even if there was a mistake, at most they would just fight each other, and after the fight, they would still drink beer together. Therefore, the two of them tacitly did not mention this again, and turned the page directly. After Gates informed the communication of the required time, the entire communication channel fell silent. Although the communication channel was quiet, it did not mean that Sherlock was quiet. You know, his 5 uncles usually gave Sherlock a serious feeling, although they were a little naughty occasionally. But Sherlock really didn't expect that they would be naughty like this during the mission. Well, how should I put it? The filter of Call of Duty can be said to be shattered. Chapter 239 Operation Code. Don't tell 10. I have a question, my dear comrade Colonel. Can I ask, have they been so naughty in the mission before? In the extremely silent communication channel, after holding back for a long time, he could not help but complain. With the end of Sherlock's complaints, the entire communication channel was silent for a few seconds. Then Soap and Gates cursed almost at the same time. At %, and asterisk, and %at Ash, quote asterisk to the differences that Soap cursed in a low voice, while Gates cursed, while typing on the keyboard frantically. To be honest, if it weren't for the mission, and the lurking mission, Sherlock even suspected that Soap would come over and hit his butt hard with his boots. If it was in the training ground, it would probably be a circle kick. Listening to the communication channel that was like a vegetable market, Price, who was driving a sniper rifle, pinched his eyebrows with a headache, while the ghost on the other side showed an unknown smile under his mask. After a while, Price finally stopped the two people's behavior in the communication channel. Okay, the entertainment time is over. Soap and Gates, be quiet, don't forget that you are still on a mission. Also, Rookie, please call me Colonel. If you really want to add a prefix, I suggest you add Mr. or something like that. You should know that decades ago, just based on the title you just used, it is enough for the military police to investigate you for 10 days or half a month in the army. Price couldn't help but complain in the communication, and Sherlock could only shrug his shoulders behind the screen, secretly complaining in his heart, haha, you rednecks don't know the charm of this title at all. However, after such a commotion, the tension of the original lurking mission was almost digested, and the pressure in the hearts of Sherlock and the other two who were responsible for the lurking would not be so great. It can only be said that high-end troops have their own way to relieve stress. The three of them hid in the room bored for about 3 minutes, and Gates' voice continued to sound again in the communication. Done. The good news is that the customer management office is not very far from you. You can get there by turning a corner. After hearing Gates' news, Soap couldn't help but frowned, and then continued. What's the bad news? Hearing Soap's question, Gates continued to speak while typing frantically. The bad news is that you don't have much time. There seems to be a hidden artificial intelligence in the damn AIM system. He is constantly attacking my computer. I can only hold on for about 10 minutes. In these 10 minutes, I need you to split into 2 groups. One group goes to the computer room upstairs to install the receiver I gave you, so that I can block the detection of me by the damn AI in the server. The other group goes to the customer management office according to the original plan, to insert the intrusion USB drive I gave you. There is no delay in both. This is the fastest solution. You must speed up. I can't hold on for long. Hearing Gates' increasingly fast speech, Soap's brows began to frown tightly, and began to quickly arrange the task process. Rookie, take the USB drive to the customer management office, to help Gates get treatment. Zhao, you and I will quickly go to the computer room. Gates can't hold on for long. Rookie, I give you free firing authority. If you are really discovered, you must take the initiative, and don't hesitate at all. When he said this, Soap paused for a moment before continuing. If it really doesn't work, I allow you to use your tricks. Remember, no intelligence is more important than your life. After hearing Soap's instructions, Sherlock nodded obediently, and didn't take it to heart. How to say it, although Sherlock has been too focused on magic in recent years, and neglected military training, he is a player who has been trained for 7 years by all members of the 141 team. He thinks he is still very confident when facing this group of players who can only use medicine. If he really uses magic when facing this group of little trash, it will be a shame for the 5 of him. After arranging the task, Soap took Sherlock and Zhao to form a standard CQB formation and slowly opened the door of the office and walked out. This time, because Sherlock needed to leave halfway, he did not stand at the back of the team, but exchanged positions with Zhao and stood in the middle. Just as Gates said, the customer management office was not far from the heir office. After going out of a door and walking less than 5 steps, you can see a double opening metal door at the corner. Looking at the manufacturing and locking method of this door, it should be locked by magnetic locking. After Soap made a few gestures, Xiaoqi Yang quickly took out a palm-sized black box from his backpack and handed it to Sherlock. Sherlock left the team of 2 and came to the door alone. This is an effective device with magnetic locking for unknown principles. Sherlock did not know what the principle was, but he knew how to use it. He put the small box in his hand near the top of the door, and with an almost inaudible beeping sound, the originally closed door loosened a little. Sherlock took the small box in his hand without hesitation, stuffed it into his pocket, and carefully walked into this so-called customer management office with a gun in hand. But after entering the door, Sherlock was dumbfounded. This place was not like what they had imagined at the beginning, where all the customer files were stored in computers. Instead, it was paper files made up of rows of filing cabinets. Of course, there were computers. In front of the rows of filing cabinets, there was a computer that looked ordinary, and the most important thing was that there was no window here. The whole room was almost filled with filing cabinets. A pure replica of the Hydra's archive room. Sherlock felt that his head was about to explode. He never expected that this would happen. He quickly called Gates in the headset. Gates, this is the Rookie. We are in trouble. Damn Killian, a good biotech company actually uses paper files for storage. Hearing Sherlock's voice, Gates in the communication was also silent for a rare moment and then continued. No electronic equipment? Pure paper files? After hearing Gates' words, Sherlock turned on the computer and plugged in the USB drive in his hand before applying. There is a computer that has plugged your USB drive into it, but I don't think there is much hope. At this moment, Price's voice interrupted Sherlock and Gates' communication. Rookie, I lost your vision. Repeat. I lost your vision. Chapter 240 Operation Code. Don't tell 11. As soon as Price said this, Sherlock and Gates were silent for a moment, but Sherlock was so smart that he understood what Price meant in just a few breaths. You have to know that the so-called customer management office, where Sherlock is now, is actually a small archive room. The most important thing is that there are no windows here, and because of the need to ensure a constant temperature and humidity environment, the door here will not be opened frequently, and even the patrolling people will not open the door of this archive room. This also led to the fact that the customer management office where Sherlock is essentially a small secret room, which is not much different from a few people in the ventilation duct. And now Price said in the communication that he lost Sherlock's vision, so the meaning is already very clear. He can't see here, and similarly, the group of people staring at 141 can't see Sherlock either. You have to know that the infrared imaging scope in Price's hand is not a cheap one. It can see the enemy's body temperature through the wall. Compared with ordinary infrared imaging, the one in Price's hand can be said to be a zenith technology. Even if Tony makes an infrared imaging instrument, it won't be much better than the one in Price's hand now. This is the limitation of the times. It's like Tony can't make a nano armor like Mark 50 now. Price interrupted the conversation between the two and said such a suggestive sentence to Sherlock for no reason. Let go and use your magical tricks. Sherlock even felt that the reason why Price didn't say it clearly was probably because the old man was used to being cautious and afraid that someone would monitor their communication. After all, although they have a lot of good stuff in their hands, it is really hard to imagine what kind of black technology the other party will have in such a rampage era. After getting Price's authorization, Sherlock didn't hesitate. After dealing with a sentence in the communication, he was ready to get busy. Price, who knew Sherlock too well, understood that Sherlock understood his hint after hearing Sherlock's slightly perfunctory answer. He sighed helplessly and continued to assist Soap and Xiaoqi Yang. After all, compared to Sherlock who has already entered the safe zone, the situation on Soap and Xiaoqi Yang's side is undoubtedly much more dangerous. As for Sherlock, after perfunctorily dealing with Price, the first thing Sherlock did was to wander around the entire archive room, because Sherlock wanted to confirm one thing, that is, whether there are surveillance cameras here, and how many surveillance cameras there are. After Sherlock's comprehensive field investigation, it is true that Sherlock found a lot of hidden cameras in addition to the cameras on the four corners of the room. Most of them are hidden on the shelves to secretly monitor the safety of the filing cabinets. Only one camera is located in a strange position, under the desk, and the most important thing is that this camera is an independent camera that is not connected to the internet. Sherlock really can't figure out why there is such a strange camera under the desk. Driven by curiosity, Sherlock used the computer thrown in the library to read the contents of the storage card. Well, I can only say that the contents are really a bit unsightly. But I didn't know that the manager of this archive room is a young lady who likes to wear short skirts. Having satisfied his curiosity, Sherlock felt quite speechless. He could only sigh that AIM was indeed the company of Killian, the villain chosen by the screenwriter in the plot of Iron Man 3. Not to mention the sweet shop. The most important thing is that there is a guy who installs cameras. If you don't become a villain, who will? Really, Killian's death can be said to be not unjust at all. After sighing, Sherlock took out his phone and called. After only a few rings, the phone was answered, and the person who answered was the person Sherlock was looking for. Good evening, Mr. Sherlock. Mr. Tony is in the underground laboratory. Do you need me to transfer the call? Jarvis's slightly mechanical voice reached Sherlock's ears through the receiver. After hearing Jarvis' voice, Sherlock's smile became more intense. He quickly rejected Jarvis' request and replied, No, Jarvis, I'm not here to find Tony, but to find you. After hearing Sherlock's words, Jarvis, as an artificial intelligence, was stunned for a moment before continuing. Of course, sir, I'm happy to help you. What can I do for you? Of course I will help you. What else can I do besides helping you? You have to know that Sherlock has the secondary authority authorized by Tony, which is basically not much different from Pepper Potts. Of course, he can ask Jarvis to do something. Otherwise, why do you think Jarvis had the patience to accept Sherlock's idiotic remarks and helped Sherlock download a small movie to spoof Tony? Although Jarvis didn't want to bother with Sherlock just because of the idiotic remarks, he couldn't help but Sherlock really had the authority. This was also the point that Jarvis, who had no body, felt uncomfortable. After hearing Jarvis's agreement, Sherlock no longer hesitated and immediately stated his needs. Jarvis, do you know AIM? I'm in the customer management office in the building of AIM Company now. I need you to locate my position and block the cameras here so that the surveillance on the other side of the camera can keep playing in a loop. Can you do it? The reason why Sherlock called Jarvis and wanted to ask Jarvis to help do these things is actually very simple. Do you remember that Sherlock's family actually has an intelligent AI assistant? Sherlock named her the Red Queen. There are actually two reasons why he didn't ask his own Red Queen to do this. On the one hand, the Red Queen's computing power is really not enough. It is already amazing that she can hide the figures of Sherlock, Soap and Zhao in the camera in real time. There is no extra computing power to process more information. Besides, Sherlock's request is simple, but it is also difficult. After all, it involves a certain degree of autonomy in video editing. But Jarvis is different. Even after the birth of Vision, Tony himself admitted that he could never create another Jarvis. He could only use the secondary Friday as a substitute. In terms of information processing, Jarvis sometimes even surpasses ordinary people. As for computing power, let alone with Tony's huge funds as support, Jarvis is more like the gap between a quantum computer and a large server compared to the Red Queen, and it can even be described as a generation gap. Chapter 241 Operation Code, Don't Tell 12. It only took a short while for Jarvis' answer to reach Sherlock's ears through the phone. I'm sorry, sir. AIM's external network bandwidth is very busy and cannot support me to help you hack and modify the surveillance. If you can connect your phone directly to AIM's internal network, I can try. And I did some testing. After testing, I found that a computer is hacking and counter-hacking with AIM's internal services, occupying a lot of bandwidth. And there is also an artificial intelligence AI inside AIM that is modifying the surveillance images in real time. Are you sure you need me to hack and modify the surveillance video of your place? After hearing Jarvis' report, Sherlock couldn't help but sigh again that Jarvis was powerful. He could detect the battle between AIM and Gates from the periphery, and at the same time, he could find the tail left by the Red Queen. To be honest, if it weren't for the mission, Sherlock also knew how awesome Jarvis was. Sherlock even wanted to call Tony on the spot to ask if the Red Queen Tony gave him was a defective product. Fortunately, Sherlock was still on a mission, and he still had some sense. When faced with Jarvis's question, Sherlock agreed. Of course, Jarvis, I'll connect my phone to the AIM company's intranet now. The AI and the computer are our own people. If possible, you can help clean up the mess, Sherlock said as he searched on his body. This was because Sherlock had the habit of carrying a charger with him, otherwise it would be difficult to find a data cable in this situation. He connected his phone to the only computer in the archive room with a data cable, and Jarvis' voice came through the receiver. Okay, Mr. Sherlock, I'll complete your request in 1 minute. As time passed, Jarvis completed Sherlock's request in just 1 minute. After thanking him, Sherlock hung up the phone and put away his equipment. Coincidentally, Gates also told Sherlock at this time that he had collected the data from this computer and could recycle the USB drive. Without any hesitation, Sherlock packed up his things. After using the Philosopher's Stone to get some gold, he bought another box of the same model as Newt's from the vending machine in his library. Then, just like what Sherlock did in the Hydra base under the Trident building of S.H.I.E.L.D., Sherlock turned into a ruthless moving machine and began to stuff those file cabinets into the seemingly small suitcase one by one. Of course, the whole process was done with magic, so Sherlock would not be stupid enough to move them by himself. Although this was not the first time, Sherlock couldn't help but sigh that magic was so convenient. After all, even such a boring job as moving can be truly fully automatic under the effect of magic. This is shocking in the Muggle world. God knows what those Muggles who don't know magic will think when they see the file cabinets jump into the box, as if they have grown legs. And the file cabinets that jump in will arrange themselves, ensuring that the 4 of them look the same as they do in the box. It's amazing. Of course, Sherlock wouldn't just stand there and do nothing. He was just sitting around doing nothing. He grabbed a file cabinet and took a few documents to read. It was just a coincidence. When Sherlock saw the familiar names on the documents he grabbed, he was completely silent. Good guy, Crab, Doyle, Mike, Trevor, Sheffield? Good guy, really good guy. That's right, Sherlock got the files of the guards he saw along the way. It was just as Price said. The security guards patrolling the floors of AIM were all bombers, and they were all injected with the extremis virus. The only thing was the names of these people. How to say it? All villains? What? Mike and Trevor are the protagonists? They are not villains? Brother, do you want to see what you did in Los Santos when you controlled Trevor and Mike when you were playing? Putting aside the missions, the things you do in your free time alone are enough to get you killed more than 10 times. No one would drive along the line in Los Santos, wait for the traffic lights, and never pay attention to the ladies standing on the side of the road without playing the missions, right? No way. No way. That's Los Santos. Compared with Los Santos, Gotham City can be said to have simple folk customs. How does that saying go? If you are in Gotham City, you may still have a chance of survival, if you are honest. But if you are in Los Santos, I suggest you just buy a gun and start over. If you are even more unfortunate and are still in the online mode of Los Santos, brother, just touch the accelerator directly. At least it is much easier and more pleasant than being hit by a car when you go out to buy a gun, encountering a gunfight, encountering a bank robbery, encountering those guys who gave birth to children without an assholes driving a UFO to bomb the whole map, etc. After complaining for a while, Sherlock stuffed the file back into the filing cabinet and let go of the unlucky filing cabinet that he had caught temporarily, returning it to where it should be. Sherlock didn't dare to look any further. God knows what else this messy Marvel world has that can ruin your worldview. Sherlock even began to feel lucky that he didn't actually reach his original destination, Los Angeles, when he drove by himself. Otherwise he might have really experienced a real-life version. It's probably the online version, and with the development of the Marvel World timeline, maybe there will be modules added in the end. Just thinking about it makes Sherlock sweat. Fortunately, Sherlock didn't have much time to think about it. Soon after Sherlock let go of the filing cabinet, the entire archive room was moved clean by Sherlock. The cunning Sherlock even released a permanent confusion spell. Only those who know magic like Sherlock can see this real empty archive room. Otherwise, the muggles can only see the original appearance of the archive room. Well, this is how they blatantly bully AIM. These people are all muggles, so what? Sherlock was very satisfied with his behavior. Just as he was about to contact Gates to ask if there was anyone outside the door, and he was about to evacuate, Gates' voice rang out in the communication. "Rookie, are you done over there? Soap and Zio-Kiang need your support." Chapter 242 Operation Code, Don't Tell 13. To be honest, after hearing the content of Gates' communication, Sherlock was very nervous and imagined various situations in his mind. Firefight, capture, injury. Various situations began to rehearse in Sherlock's mind and kept repeating, making Sherlock a little upset. After all, as one of Sherlock's 5 uncles, if we really talk about battlefield survivability, apart from magic, Sherlock thinks that Soap and Zio-Kiang should be several times more than him. If Soap and Zio-Kiang couldn't handle the situation together, could he still handle it if he really couldn't use magic? Sherlock himself didn't know. While rushing on the road, Sherlock made plans for various situations in his mind, and almost every one of them took into account the worst situation. But what Sherlock never expected was that the problem encountered by Soap and Zio-Kiang was not any of the situations he considered. Sherlock hurried to the end of the high-rise office on the 32nd floor. As long as he went up a staircase, he could see the boss's office on the 33rd floor, which was Killian's office. But what Sherlock didn't expect was that he actually met Soap and Zio-Kiang, who looked tangled at the stairs. The expressions of the two looked like they had eaten shit. How to say it? It's hard to describe, but you can tell at a glance that they were speechless and irritable. Sherlock, who thought of many abnormal situations, didn't expect that the two would stop here and not move. He couldn't help but have a lot of question marks in his head. What happened? Why don't you move on? Gates is still waiting for help. Sherlock asked his soul. Facing Sherlock's soul question, Soap's face became darker, but Zio-Kiang sighed helplessly and pointed to the stairs behind him and said, "Go and see for yourself." After hearing Zio-Kiang's words, Sherlock still had a lot of question marks in his head. After scratching his head, he carefully went upstairs along the stairs. Killian's office gradually appeared in front of Sherlock. It has to be said that, although Killian is a villain, he really enjoys himself. The whole office is more like a living room of a large flat floor house than an office. It is luxuriously decorated and has many functional partitions. There are kitchens, water bars, office areas, and reception areas. If you add a bedroom, it will be a high-rise exquisite residence. The most amazing thing is not these 4 complete equipment, but the luxurious and low-key decoration of the entire office area. As we all know, most high-rise buildings are sealed with glass curtain walls. Although the scenery is really amazing, it is undoubtedly impossible to open windows for ventilation. But Killian's office has natural wind. Standing at the stairs, Sherlock can even feel the unique smell of the air outside New York. That's right, even if you can't open the window, you can still feel the natural wind through special decoration. Sherlock saw this design in a latest decoration magazine. I never thought that the first time I saw this design in reality was in Killian's office. And the most important thing is the feeling of the glass curtain wall. You have to know that the entire AIM building is covered with glass curtain walls. Even the exterior of AIM itself is covered with glass curtain walls, but glass is not the same as glass. Sherlock is sure that the glass curtain walls of the offices on the 30th to 32nd floors are very ordinary tempered glass, with at most 1 or several layers of laminated glass to ensure that, even if the glass curtain walls are damaged, they will not harm pedestrians or people in the office below. But the glass curtain wall on the 33rd floor is obviously very different from the one downstairs. Although they are all glass, and although the light transmittance is even better than that of the 30th to 32nd floors downstairs, the thickness is almost as thick as an adult's fist. Just based on the thickness, Sherlock is sure that the entire 33rd floor's exterior glass is bulletproof. However, these are not the coolest things. The coolest thing is Killian's desk. Wow, a huge desk made of all mahogany and carved. Sherlock can see the exquisite patterns carved on the desk from a distance, and you can tell that it is quite old just by looking at it. Sherlock has never seen such a desk even at Tony's place. If you insist, maybe you can find the same one in a museum. Just looking at that desk, Sherlock was completely Spartan. Who would use antiques as a desk? However, this was not the coolest thing. The coolest thing was the background behind Curion's desk. Behind the boss chair was a huge piece of high transparency crystal glass. Through the glass, you could see rows of server cabinets flashing blue lights. Coupled with the special decoration of the computer room and the dim lights, it actually gave people a feeling of infinite extension. The huge glass well isolated the noise generated by the server, and coupled with the special decoration, Sherlock could even feel how oppressive Curion would feel sitting behind the huge antique desk. The perfect combination of technology and retro is. However, what really stopped Soap and Xiaoqiang was not the luxurious decoration of Curion's office, but the people who were gathered in the boxing ring and the leisure area of Curion's office. Yes, that's right. There were 4 people in total, and Sherlock happened to know them all. They were the guards he had just seen in the archives room. Responsible Crab and Doyle, Carefree, Mike and Trevor. At this time, Crab was competing with Trevor in the Imperial City on the ring, while Doyle and Mike were standing on the sidelines like coaches, constantly instructing the two. Such a weird scene can be said to have made Sherlock stunned. Wow, this wave is purely a dream linkage between Harry Potter and Give Him Love 5. If the situation was not wrong, Sherlock would even want to jump up and give a passionate commentary. He even thought of the name of the duel, Slytherin vs. Los Santos. After figuring out the hungry situation, Sherlock ran downstairs with a constipated face to meet up with Soap and Xiaoqiang, and also understood why Soap looked like he had eaten shit. Wow, Gates was still waiting to complete the mission to save his life, and the 2 waves of guards upstairs actually started the Imperial City Park and refused to leave. Isn't this purely a mess? After holding it in for a long time, Sherlock finally couldn't hold back his curiosity and secretly pulled Xiaoqiang aside to ask, "What's going on?" The guards in AIM actually started fighting among themselves. Xiaoqiang answered Sherlock's question with a look of annoyance. It seems to be a way for the guards to resolve conflicts. 2 serious and responsible guards couldn't stand the two slacking off, so they issued a challenge. Apart from not using their flaming bomber skill, Soap and I observed for a while and found that they were really merciless. Listening to their chatter, there are quite a few such incidents, about once a week. Damn, we actually caught up with it today. Chapter 243 Operation Code, Don't Tell 14. Facing Xiaoqiang's explanation, Sherlock was also quite speechless. Good man, if this idea was applied to buying lottery tickets, Tony, the richest man, would probably have nothing to do now. But since there is a problem, then we have to find a way to solve it, right? If there is no Sherlock, then there are only 2 options for Soap. Pull Xiaoqiang to support the 4 guards who have not reacted, and shoot the 4 people in the head in an instant. Then pray that no one will find out, and quickly go to the server behind Killian's desk within 20 minutes, to plug in the signal receiver given by Gates and evacuate quickly. As for whether it will alert the enemy later, that is something to consider later. Or just give up the server behind, and now everyone will evacuate here quickly. Pray that the internal staff of AIM Company just regards Gates as an ordinary network intrusion, and then go back, and pray to find a trace of clues in the treatment. No matter which of the 2 options, the tolerance rate is too low, even so low, that Soap cannot help but consider it carefully. That's why Gates told Sherlock to think of a solution. After all, Sherlock has many ideas and some magical gadgets that may solve the problem. This dilemma also successfully made Sherlock embarrassed. Although magic can easily solve these problems, Killian's office is not a closed space after all. Once Sherlock really uses supernatural powers, exposing his identity may be a small matter, and his own business may be in trouble in the future because of this action. But it has come to this point. It is a bit difficult to ask Sherlock to give up. Sherlock also squatted on the ground with his head in his arms like Soap, and began to think about the solution. While thinking, Sherlock began to look for something in his library that could be used. You really don't say. Sherlock really found something that can be used. Produced by SHIELD. Anesthesia bullet. A silent, tasteless, and painless product. Once hit, even a cow can be knocked down on the spot. The most important thing is that this thing has a characteristic, which is to cause short-term amnesia. In other words, after waking up, you will not remember why you fainted or how you fainted. The human brain has a very magical characteristic, that is, the characteristic of smooth logic. When something happens that is not logical, the brain will make up for some things that have never happened to make the logic smooth. In other words, after being hit by this anesthetic bullet and waking up, although they will not remember how they fainted, they will find reasons for themselves how they fainted. All Sherlock has to do is to deal with the scene after knocking them down, so that the scene imaging is in a more reasonable state, and the rest is left to them. This is fucking amazing. Sherlock even remembers the magical feeling he had after seeing the introduction of this bullet. Without the slightest hesitation, Charlotte immediately took out this anesthetic bullet produced by SHIELD. After explaining it to Soap and Zhao Qiang, the three of them emptied a magazine for safety and replaced it with this anesthetic bullet. After changing the bullets, the three of them once again quietly touched the stairs leading to the 33rd floor. At this time, the Royal City Park was still not over. Leo Cui used all his madness to fight Crab on the ring. After carefully observing the situation, Soap whispered instructions to Zhao Qiang and Sherlock. Leave the two crazy guys on the ring to me and choose one of the remaining two rookies. The remaining one is for Zhao Qiang. You are allowed to fire freely, but try to kill them with one shot. Rookie, fire when you are ready. After hearing Soap's words full of the flavor of Call of Duty, Sherlock was also very happy. How to say it, the flavor of Call of Duty is too authentic. It was just like Sherlock dreaming back to the time when he played Call of Duty with his friends all night in the internet cafe. After taking a deep breath, Sherlock put the red ring of the whole system firmly on the top of Gore's head standing outside the ring, held his breath, and then gently pulled the trigger. Pa. The subsonic reduced charge bullets in the silencer made the sound of the bullets almost imperceptible. In the sight, Gore's head tilted back almost the moment Sherlock pulled the trigger. As Sherlock pulled the trigger, less than a second later, Soap also pulled the trigger twice. Zhao Qiang also pulled the trigger at the same time as Soap, but Zhao Qiang only pulled it once. After 4 consecutive small sounds of bullets being fired, the originally lively arena suddenly became quiet. Goyle and Mike fell on the guardrail of the arena, and Leo Cui and Crab in the arena also fell asleep. Seeing that all the enemies fell down, Soap quickly got up without hesitation and rushed to the computer room behind Killian's desk, while Sherlock and Zhao Qiang were still vigilantly holding their guns and slowly approaching the arena. It must be said that the products produced by S.H.I.E.L.D. are easy to use. The 4 people were completely in a posture of falling asleep, and there was not even a trace of wounds on their bodies. Because Sherlock was afraid that the extremis virus would have some magical resistance to this anesthetic. After making sure that the 4 people were unconscious, he shot them several more times. Then he and Zhao Qiang moved the 4 people to the ring, creating the illusion that the 4 people were fighting, and then all were knocked unconscious. Sherlock was even afraid that the anesthetic that affects memory would not be so effective, so he secretly stuffed his wand into his sleeve and used memory magic to modify the memories of the 4 people. This was the first time Sherlock used memory magic. Not to mention that it felt magical. It was as if you were editing a video. Sherlock arranged a Japanese-style hot-blooded plot for the 4 people. Crab was defeated by Leo Cui on the ring and was knocked unconscious. Gore jumped onto the ring in anger to deal with Leo Cui. Mike saw that his good friend was knocked unconscious and jumped onto the ring to fight with Gore. As a result, the two were evenly matched. The 2 fists hit each other almost at the same time, causing both sides to fall into a coma almost at the same time. Well, who is not a passionate young man with the soul of a middle school student? Anyway, Sherlock is very satisfied with the plot he arranged. It really has the flavor of a passionate high school. What? Isn't Sherlock unable to use magic? Is magic so inconvenient? The wand is hidden in the sleeve. When moving these 4 unlucky guys, didn't he change it? With the help of the sleeve and Zhao Qiang's cover, the little light of memory magic didn't leak out at all. No one will find out that Sherlock secretly tampered with it. Everything is so perfect and natural. After completing everything, Sherlock and Zhao Qiang even ran to Killian's refrigerator and took 2 cans of Coke and drank them. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244 Mission End and Follow-Up. When the sun shines on the earth again, Sherlock is already in the tower of his own training ground, eating American-style breakfast with his 5 uncles. There is nothing much to say about the ending of last night's operation. Sherlock, Soap and Zhao Qiang returned by the same route. It is worth mentioning that, because the mission was completed, Soap and Zhao Qiang also had some fun. With Sherlock's magic that can shrink their bodies, the 2 of them can be said to have thoroughly experienced the feeling of an Air Force dogfight in the ventilation duct, except that no bullets were really fired. Of course, apart from Sherlock's 3-person action team, the only change was that when the few people returned to the inspection port on the 31st floor, the people in the lounge also discovered the 4 missing people. After a period of chaos and all the staff were dispatched, the incident was finally characterized as a misunderstanding. Sherlock watched a group of guards talking and laughing as the 4 people who were not very fresh came back. So, although fighting each other until they fainted at the same time is a low probability event, it does not mean that it will not happen. Under Sherlock's magic control, the confessions of the 4 people were surprisingly consistent, and the other guards did not doubt it. However, Crab, Goyle, Mike and Old CUI suffered a lot. Sherlock heard them call the 4 people a hot-blooded fool when they drove them back to rest. Of course, although the mission was successfully completed, it does not mean that the training ground is safe. The invasion of Ames building can only be regarded as a pre-task for many tasks. What Sherlock and others will face next is the real test. They have to find clues about Ames' laboratory from a large amount of information and finally deduce the location of Ames' laboratory. After listening to the task assigned by Price, Sherlock rolled his eyes and almost died on the spot. Thinking about the files he got back from AIM, Sherlock really wanted to grab Price by the collar and ask if this was a job that a normal person could do. Of course, before the huge amount of paperwork began, Price, as the captain, still had to summarize the action last night. It can only be said that Price knew what it meant to give Sherlock a sweet date after a stick. He started by scolding Sherlock severely and at the same time praised Sherlock for his contribution in this action, which made Sherlock roll his eyes. After that, Price changed his tone and said that, although there were merits and faults, the merits were generally less than the faults, so Sherlock could escape the death penalty, and he used this as an excuse to stuff Sherlock with a lot of documents. Sherlock certainly stood up to resist. As Sherlock's parent and the squad leader of the action team, Price did not pamper Sherlock at all and gave Sherlock a CPU. He said things like "you are the youngest, we are all your parents," etc., which made Sherlock stunned. I don't know why. Looking at the weak and eloquent Price, Sherlock always felt that this guy has the potential to be a ZW. But who is Sherlock? In his previous life, he was a hard-working worker. He may not have other skills, but his anti-CPU skill is maximum out. If he doesn't maximum out, he will be overwhelmed by the boss's big pie. In the end, Price gave up on CPU Sherlock and gave Sherlock 2 choices. Either you get kicked out by our circle and continue to do your work with more quantity but no price increase, or you go to work quietly and honestly. Choose one of the 2. Sherlock said, "Do I need to think about my temper?" Of course, he honestly held his large copy of the information and found a corner of the conference room to start looking through it. Fortunately, Price is not a devil, so he naturally won't put all the pressure on Sherlock, a junior, and contacted some Black Widows to participate in the data sorting operation. With the participation of the Black Widows, the speed of data sorting and archiving has become faster and faster. The most important attack was still on the Black Widows. After all, the Red House was a large organization. There were Black Widows in charge of field work and Black Widows in charge of internal work. The Black Widows who came to support this time were responsible for internal affairs. The so-called data sorting and finding useful information from a large amount of data were also their old business. In addition, with the support of Sherlock's energy potion, this group of people could work without sleep, which greatly accelerated the speed of these people processing data. However, the scene at the scene was too horrible to look at. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a night parade of 100 ghosts. Even Sherlock himself was not much better. His resentment was comparable to that of the 996 workers he saw in the AIM building. No, it was even greater than that of the workers. After all, it was a 24-hour non-stop operation. In order to find the location of the laboratory as soon as possible, this group of people basically stayed in the small conference room here except for going to the toilet. The Tulalita consciously took on the logistics tasks of the crowd. Hamburgers, coffee, and refreshing potions never stopped. Sherlock was released from the conference room on the morning of the third day. The reason was very simple. Tony called Sherlock. Happy was attacked and is now lying in the hospital. The situation is not very good. Tony wants to ask Sherlock if there is any special medicine or something. After hearing Tony's call, Sherlock immediately said that he would go to the hospital to see Happy now and don't let Tony make any decisions before he arrives. After the call was hung up, Sherlock told Price about the situation and rushed out of the conference room without even looking back. When Sherlock rushed out of the tower and saw the sun hanging in the sky, Sherlock was so excited that tears almost came out. Now Sherlock has only one feeling. Regret. Very regretful. Regret that he took out such a thing as the enhancement potion. Originally, he was just tired of sorting out the information and thought of drinking some to refresh himself, but was discovered by Price. It was discovered, and Sherlock didn't think of hiding it, but Sherlock didn't expect that this group of people were a group of wolves. That was a person who was even more ruthless than a ruthless person. Not only was he ruthless to his enemies, he was even more ruthless to himself. All the staff began to work non-stop with Sherlock's enhancement potion. The entire conference room was full of excitement. Now that he had a legitimate reason, Sherlock wanted to escape from this hellish sweet shop without any hesitation. Damn it, the capitalists I worked for in my previous life were not like Price. If this were in the former Soviet Union, a boss like Price would have to float above the street lights. Chapter 245 Happy is attacked. Driving at lightning speed towards the New York Presbyterian Hospital, the first People's Hospital of New York City, Sherlock was in high spirits. After all, Sherlock just wanted to escape from that place that was so chaotic that he wanted to get as far away as possible. Even if Thor came to Asgard with a rainbow bridge to call him, Sherlock wouldn't mind calling Thor his righteous husband. But Sherlock completely ignored what kind of honor he had now. So when Sherlock appeared in Happy's ward, he was so exhausted that everyone in the ward was shocked. Even Tony was ready to summon the Mark 42 armor. In fact, it was no wonder that the people in the wardroom acted so strongly. After all, Sherlock's honor now was a bit, well, too advanced. There were 2 huge dark circles under his eyes and a mess of hair like a chicken coop. The most important thing was that there were actually a few eggs and a bird inside, and they looked alive. The handsome face now looked like it was drained, becoming thin and pale. It was no exaggeration to say that Sherlock was extremely kidney deficient. With a messy stubble on his face, he looked like he might die on the ground in the next second. Compared to Happy, who was lying on the bed and had his wounds treated, Sherlock looked like the one who should be rescued. Tony and Pepper in the ward spent a long time to determine that this guy who looked like a vacant gentleman might be their good nephew Sherlock. Sherlock? Is it Sherlock? Pepper asked tentatively after walking out from behind Tony, who was standing on guard and posing, after carefully observing the sloppy Sherlock. After hearing what Pepper said, Sherlock rolled his eyes fiercely at Tony, who was still posing but looked surprised, and said unhappily, "Nonsense, who else could it be if not me? By the way, do you have any water? Give me some." Tony and Pepper were a little slow to react when they heard Sherlock's slightly hoarse but very familiar voice. It is said that 2 people can sleep in the same bed. Pepper and Tony kept their surprised postures and handed Sherlock an unopened bottle of mineral water. After Sherlock took it, he was like a traveler lost in the desert. In just a few seconds, he drank the bottle of water clean. It was not until Sherlock finished drinking the water that Tony and Pepper reacted reluctantly. Pepper was worthy of being Sherlock's aunt. She pulled Sherlock to ask questions with a distressed look on her face. Sherlock did not hide anything and told her everything about the tasks he carried out in AIM and the hellish life like the training camp in the past few days. Tony silently gave Sherlock a thumbs up. Of course, there was also the necessary curiosity. Although Tony already knew that Sherlock's current appearance was caused by the side effects of the potion, he still wanted to know what entry could produce such an effect. Sherlock did not hide it and directly told Tony the name of the entry, Mr. Emptiness, superimposed on Life Pillar, to become what it is now. After all, in the current tower conference room, Sherlock's current state is definitely the most normal. Don't you see that the two lollies have to stand at the door for a long time every time they enter the conference room to do psychological preparation? Mr. Emptiness is the main culprit for Sherlock's current kidney deficiency, but Sherlock never told Tony about the effect of the entry. After all, if the effect of this entry is told to others, it will definitely be Sherlock's black history for life. But Sherlock did not hide the life pillar of the bird's nest on his head and told Tony directly. This entry even has an interesting effect. That is, the bird eggs on Sherlock's head actually have a therapeutic effect, and they taste good, and the number of bird eggs is locked at 3. Sherlock even gave Tony and Pepper 2 bird eggs as souvenirs with the angry bat pecking at their heads. Of course, Sherlock forgot about Happy, who was lying on the bed, and pried open Happy's mouth with Tony, and poured a raw bird egg into it. You know what? The effect was surprisingly good. After the bird egg entered Happy's mouth, Happy's condition was visibly much better, and even his eyelids began to tremble. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes, but when Happy opened his eyes, he saw a bird's nest on his head, a pair of big dark circles, and a pale face like a great-grandmother who had died for 3 days, as if Sherlock, who was about to ascend to heaven, was smiling at him. There was also a worried and melancholy Tony next to him, who couldn't breathe and fainted again. Tony was so scared that he started to call for a doctor again. Soon, Happy's ward was surrounded by doctors called by Tony, but for some reason, although every doctor stood by Happy's bed, it seemed that everyone's attention was on Sherlock, who was standing with Tony. For some reason, this group of doctors always felt that compared to the fat man lying on the bed, the young man standing with Tony Stark needed more rescue. Well, both physically and mentally. Sherlock even suspected that, if he was not still standing with Tony at this time, and did not show any abnormality, it is estimated that this group of doctors would not pounce on Happy lying on the bed, but on himself. The examination cannot be checked. Sherlock, who has read the entry, knows that as long as he lies on the bed, as long as the examination report comes out, a doctor will make a sharp roar. If a full body examination is performed when he comes, it is estimated that Tony will not only have to sign a bunch of endangered notices, but also pay an extra day's IQ fee. Compared to these physical conditions that made the doctor scream, the erectile dysfunction and extreme kidney deficiency that Sherlock regarded as his black history might be minor problems. Although Sherlock knew that this thing was just an effect of the word, although it looked scary, it was not the kind of situation where he would catch a bullet with his face and his body would withstand a big melon, so he would definitely be fine. If Sherlock's current state had to be described, it was more like the state in the game where the blood volume was locked by the word to only 1. Although the blood volume was 1, in fact, as long as the blood bar was not really used up, Sherlock would definitely not have any problems. Well, the same was true for spitting blood in front of a group of doctors. Facing the sharp screams of the doctor in the ward, Sherlock pulled Tony and ran away without hesitation. The two finally ran to an emergency passage and avoided the doctors who were worried that Sherlock would die on the spot in the next second. Seeing the group of doctors disappear on the other side of the corridor, Sherlock pulled Tony to sit on the stairs, took out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it, looking at Tony beside him with a familiar look. "What do you decide to do next?" After Sherlock's voice fell, Tony answered Sherlock carefully with a tangled face. "Well, my dear nephew, you are in this physical condition, so don't smoke." Chapter 246 Anxious Tony and CPU Master Sherlock. Sherlock stared at Tony for a long time with a look of idiocy, and finally Tony gave in. "Tony, who was sitting on the steps, suddenly bent his back a little. As if someone had drained away his energy, he casually snatched the cigarette box and lighter from Sherlock's hand, thought for a while, and then spoke. "Okay, stop staring at me like that. To be honest, when you asked me what I was going to do next, I didn't know. I didn't even know if the path I was taking was right. In front of outsiders, I'm the handsome and wealthy owner of the Stark Group, a complete playboy, a rich second generation who relies on his talent and plays hero games unscrupulously. But in fact, I know what I'm like. In the Battle of New York, I saw aliens who are more powerful than us. They have several times more technology than us. This makes me anxious, extremely anxious. I began to fear that one day I will lose my relatives and loved ones because of something. Sherlock, do you know that, since the Battle of New York, I have been regretting announcing to the media that I'm Iron Man. I should have been hiding under that iron shell. The Iron Man without the mask can be anyone, but the Iron Man with the mask can only be Tony Stark. I always feel that I'm not strong enough, and I always feel that as an ordinary person, I can't protect the people around me. This is the case with Ethan and your parents. Even until now, I feel like a waste, especially after your store was attacked and Happy fell in front of me. I became more and more anxious. Who's next? You, Pepper. Damn it, everyone in the world knows that the only way to get revenge on Iron Man is to find Tony Stark. Tony said as he took out a cigarette from the cigarette box with trembling hands and put it in his mouth. Maybe because his hands were shaking too much, he couldn't light the cigarette successfully after several attempts with a lighter. Sherlock had never seen Tony so fragile. Although he knew that Tony had been suffering from anxiety after the Battle of New York, Sherlock really didn't expect Tony to be so anxious. Frowning, Sherlock reached out and snatched the cigarette and lighter from Tony's hand and said unhappily, "If you don't know how to smoke, don't smoke. It's a waste, you know, and it's not a good thing." Tony was almost stunned by Sherlock's sudden action. He thought about how Sherlock would comfort him after he said these words, but he never expected Sherlock to react like this. Facing Tony's astonished eyes, Sherlock's expression was still disgusted. He put away the cigarette and lighter in his hand and then continued. "Also, Tony, you think too highly of yourself. Remember, you, Tony Stark, are just an ordinary person. No matter how many armors you find, you are just an ordinary person. Similarly, Black Widow is also an ordinary person, and Hawkeye, who is about to be transferred to the Son of Nature, is also an ordinary person. Even the Captain is at most an ordinary person who is a little strong. Even me, I'm just an ordinary person who knows a little magic, and one bullet is enough to take the lives of all the people I mentioned above. This is not a joke. But it is such a group of ordinary people who defeated those well-equipped aliens who can cross the stars. Tony, have you ever thought about why this is? It's not because you have a lot of armors with different functions. It's not that everyone's strength is like Superman in the comics, who can tear apart the huge space battleship with ease. It's because of teammates. FXXK. Why don't you guys like to trust your teammates? What the hell is this stinky problem? The Captain is like this, Black Widow is like this, and you are like this too. Listen, Tony. I know that you have been educated in personal heroism since childhood, and believe that there are some things that you should fight by yourself. Face all difficulties and enemies like a hero. But personal strength is always limited. You still have a team. You still have teammates. You still have us. When you can't handle it, it's not embarrassing to ask others for help. Those who mock you will be enemies. Your friends and teammates will only lend you a helping hand and give you the greatest help they can. Although it is not ruled out that some bad friends, such as me, will madly mock you after your troubles are over, but I will definitely help you solve your troubles sincerely. In addition, even if a few of us ordinary people really can't handle your so-called big troubles, Thor, will the green fat man just watch from the side? I really don't understand what you are thinking. Listen, Tony, if it weren't for your armor, you would become Iron Man. If you really don't have your omnipotent and varied armor, you are nothing. Then you should never have it. Iron Man is not because of your armor, but because you are Tony Stark. FXXK. Don't carry everything on your shoulders. Sherlock said a lot to Tony, which made Tony stunned. After a while, Tony, who was originally feeling depressed, suddenly burst out laughing, and the whole person quickly recovered the feeling of the glorious Iron Man. He stood up, patted Sherlock on the shoulder, and said with a smile, "Ha, you, a junior, are actually teaching me. Got, it really sounds like what my father would say." Listening to Tony's ridicule, Sherlock finally couldn't help but rolled his eyes directly and didn't want to pay attention to Tony at all. To be honest, Sherlock was really a little angry just now. The words he said to Tony were also a way of saying what he wanted to say. The most important thing is that Sherlock has always done this. Whether it was the time in the Red Room or the Captain vs. Shield this time, Sherlock almost got everyone he could shake. But to be honest, Sherlock's words also made Tony feel much better. At least he was not as anxious and scared as he was at the beginning. People are like this. The more something is weighed down in their hearts, the harder it is to forget it. In the end, they will only be immersed in constant anxiety and self-consumption. But at the same time, once this thing is said out, no matter what the other party's reaction is, it will be a lot easier. Seeing Sherlock looking at him with an expression that seemed to be a dead wood that cannot be carved, Tony didn't care at all. After thinking for a while, he took out a tablet from his arms and handed it to Sherlock. "You mentioned Killian's name that day. I went back to check, but I really can't remember how I offended this person. But it doesn't matter. Although what you said makes sense, this is still my war. And as a participant, I still want to end this war caused by me with my own hands. The tablet contains the records I exported from Unit 01 and Unit 02. I hope it can be of some use to you." After saying that, Tony was about to leave, but as soon as he took a step, Tony seemed to remember something, turned around and looked at Sherlock, frowning and saying seriously, "Reminder, Sherlock, according to the scene I reconstructed, there should be 2 people who entered your store that day, but those 2 people have the same ability. You must question your own safety. The temperature of 3000 degrees is enough to vaporize many things. And you, Sherlock, are my only blood relative in this world." After listening to Tony's words, it was Sherlock's turn to be stunned. He took the small tablet in Tony's hand without reacting. Then he remembered that he had to warn Tony about the attack on the villa this time, and hurriedly grabbed Tony's arm, who was about to leave. "Listen, Tony. The next words are very important. Never ever leak any information about you. Iron Man is Tony, which has caused you a lot of trouble." Looking at the serious and cherishing Sherlock, Tony almost immediately thought of Sherlock's nonsense prophetic ability, frowned and nodded, and then turned around and continued to walk out of the corridor. Just as Tony was about to push open the fire door of the corridor, Sherlock's voice came from behind again. "Also, this is not your war, but our war. Killian will die in my hands, and even Jesus can't stop him. I said it." After hearing Sherlock's words, Tony rarely smiled. After saying "no way," he pushed open the door and quickly disappeared from Sherlock's sight. Chapter 247 The Legend of the Miracle Dr. Sherlock. Sherlock had told Tony everything he should and shouldn't have said. Seeing Tony go back to Happy's ward, Sherlock didn't plan to stay any longer. After all, Sherlock's current appearance was really different in the hospital. Sherlock was really afraid of being caught by the responsible doctors and then being tied up and sent to the laboratory for examination. Sherlock himself was still a little confused about his current condition. If he went to the laboratory, he would definitely end up with tubes all over his body. Then, when the effect of the entry wore off the next day, Sherlock would be fine. By then, it might be another medical miracle. The group of responsible and crazy doctors would have to study it repeatedly and produce dozens of papers. Sherlock was not worried about publishing papers, but it was better not to mislead the students. After all, Sherlock's entry effect was still in the scope of magic, which was completely different from science like medicine. Having said that, Sherlock didn't know that Pepper had told the doctor about the fact that he had just fed Happy a bird egg on his head when he was talking to Tony, which caused a burst of sighs from the doctors present. It's no wonder that the doctors were so crazy. After all, who has ever seen a patient's recovery effect greatly enhanced after feeding a raw egg? To be honest, the doctors had never seen it. Because of the bird egg, Happy, who was supposed to have been in a coma and had not passed the critical period, woke up directly. As for the critical period or not, it seemed as if he didn't exist at all under the X-ray of the laboratory department. Even the overall recovery speed was more than 3 or 4 times faster than that of a normal person. If you have to describe it, before being fed, Happy was an ordinary adult with overweight, but after being fed the bird egg, it was like drinking the red medicine in the game. To put it in a more middle school way, the doctors felt an endless vitality in Happy's body. This also directly led to Tony being surrounded by this group of doctors as soon as he returned to the ward and began to interrogate him frantically. Some asked if it was the latest special medicine of the Stark group, some asked if it was a miracle, and some even exaggeratedly knelt down in front of Tony and asked Tony to save his patient. Tony was full of question marks. After finally understanding the cause and effect from the mouths of a group of crazy doctors, Tony was also full of black lines on his forehead. My good nephew just taught him a lesson, and now he left him such a mess. He didn't think that these doctors were called here in a panic. For some reason, Sherlock's words suddenly appeared in Tony's mind, although it is not ruled out that some bad friends, such as me, will madly mock you after your troubles are over, but I will definitely help you solve your troubles sincerely. In an instant, Tony made up his mind and began to fool these doctors without any hesitation. Tony said all kinds of nonsense, such as magic medicine and blessing from the goddess of life. He even said that this magical pharmacist only accepted diseases that could not be cured by modern medicine. If it were not for his good relationship with him, he would not have been able to call such a great god. He also asked the doctors to keep it confidential. If it were not for the magic of the lighthouse, the magic of gender would be fine. This was obviously a lie, but this group of highly educated doctors really believed it. After all, Happy's living example was lying there. They could not help but believe it, and began to ask how to contact Sherlock. Tony thought that he had blown his own bullshit out. No matter whether Sherlock could treat terminal illnesses that could not be cured by modern medicine, he still had to give hope to those desperate patients. After thinking for a while, he finally revealed Sherlock's home address and repeatedly told the doctors that it must be a person who could not be cured by modern medicine. Otherwise there would be too many people pushed there, or the patient would hurt the heart of the great god. When the great god moved away, they would never be able to find him again. Sherlock would never have thought that his good uncle Tony had left him a mysterious legend in the hospital. Tony also could not have thought that the boast he had just wanted to make fun of Sherlock would become a secret passed down by word of mouth among the top doctors in this hospital. When they met a good patient who really couldn't be solved, they would secretly tell the patient Sherlock's home address. The result was that Sherlock's family actually became the Los Angeles branch of Camotage for a time, and also became the largest source of students for Camotage in North America. Of course, all this is a story for later. Now Sherlock is relying on the transformation technique to disguise himself as a star who came to the hospital to secretly have an abortion. He quietly ran out of the hospital and hid in his car. It is impossible to go home. After all, the house is now a concentration camp for the King of Rolls and the meeting room of the night parade of 100 ghosts. Sherlock didn't want to go back at all after he came out, but Sherlock had nowhere to go. After thinking about it, Sherlock finally decided to find a place where Price couldn't find him to sleep first. So Sherlock ran to Tony's villa without any hesitation, found his guest room, took a shower, and threw himself on the soft big bed. An hour later, Sherlock sat up angrily and threw his pillow to the ground. He put on his clothes angrily, climbed into his car, and drove all the way to his home. What? Why didn't Sherlock take this opportunity to have a good rest? Haha, rest. Under the effect of the enhancement potion, Sherlock felt tired to death, but he just couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in bed for an hour, but he couldn't fall asleep. Not only could he not fall asleep, but during this hour, Sherlock's crazy thoughts actually found 2 pieces of information that he had overlooked when sorting out the information. Sherlock, who was getting more and more angry, simply sat up and drove home. Isn't it just his fucking role? In my last life, I rolled over school and then the workplace. Damn it, since I was born, I have been rolling even when drinking milk. Damn it, how can I, a veteran test taker, be beaten by you locals who have never experienced the college entrance examination in the workplace of a certain big country in the east? Damn it, come on, Who is afraid of who? If you can't kill me, I will kill you today. Don't live. Come on, all of you. Well, I can only say that there is no work that doesn't drive you crazy. Sherlock is obviously in the late stage. Chapter 248, The Battle of the Kings. He drove back to his training ground angrily and rushed into the meeting room without stopping. Sherlock was even ready to face the scene of 100 demons parading in the smoke, but what Sherlock didn't expect was that after he pushed open the door of the meeting room, he saw an empty meeting room. There were all kinds of documents scattered on the large table, and some useless documents were even thrown on the ground. The coffee on the table was still steaming. Everything was not much different from when Sherlock just left. The only and biggest difference was that the group of demons and ghosts in the meeting room disappeared. That's right, the whole meeting room was empty, as if the original people disappeared out of thin air. Maybe because he hadn't rested for a long time, Sherlock's brain was not very sharp. His first reaction was that AIM Company was so generous that it could make all the killers in his family disappear out of thin air, but logic soon denied this conjecture. After all, there was no trace of fighting along the way. After all, no matter how powerful AIM was, it was impossible for them to make their powerful people disappear without a trace in an instant, right? If they were really that capable, why would Killian still play behind the scenes tricks? He could just assassinate them and make anyone who dared to oppose disappear. Wouldn't that make the world easy for him? Why would he need to go through so much trouble? Having said that, Sherlock still couldn't figure out how a group of people in a meeting could disappear without a trace in just 1 hour. With a hint of doubt, Sherlock turned around and began to walk around the tower, trying to find the teammates who had made him suffer. Sherlock didn't catch his teammates, but he did catch a little Lori Lorna carrying a large bag of hamburgers in the corridor. When Price led Sherlock and the Black Widows to start the intelligence sorting work, Lorna and Mindy took on the logistics work on their own initiative. Although they were not as sleepless as the group of wolves in the conference room who only relied on drugs to support them, they were still exhausted by such high-intensity work. They even started to work in shifts in the later period. At this time, Lorna's little face was obviously tired. For the first time in her limited career, she saw the madness of adults at work. To be honest, Mindy and Lorna were already a little stressed. The workplace of adults was really terrible. Under Sherlock's questioning, Lorna told Sherlock the information he wanted to know in exchange for asking Sherlock to help deliver the big bag of hamburgers to the conference room. Sherlock did not hesitate at all. With a wave of his wand, the hamburgers lined up and walked towards the conference room in Lorna's envious eyes. Seeing that the reward had been paid, Lorna no longer hesitated to tell Sherlock the truth. It turned out that not long after Sherlock left, Price and Black Widow, the group of kings of Roll, could no longer bear it. In their eyes, Sherlock, the most desperate king of Roll, finally left this damn conference room. They all stood up and asked for a break. After all, they had never been so tired in a war. And looking at the appearance of everyone in the conference room now, those who have a human form are already lucky. A Black Widow has even transformed into a tentacle monster. Except for the head, which is still a human head, the rest are all tentacles. Price did not expect that things would turn out like this in the end. Originally, he just planned to work in a 996 way at most. He did not expect Sherlock to take out such a love-hate thing as the enhancement potion. Moreover, Sherlock, the youngest of the generation, has started to work with medicine. Can these uncles, aunts, sisters, and brothers still have the nerve to say that they can't stand it and want to rest? That must be impossible. So, an inexplicable internal roll began inexplicably under Sherlock's unintentional behavior. Sherlock looked at this group of uncles, aunts, brothers, and sisters and felt that these people were all wolves. They worked so hard without taking a rest. They were ruthless people. If they stopped working, they would inevitably be punished by Price, so they also started to work hard. And these uncles, aunts, brothers, and sisters saw that Sherlock was completely the opposite. My goodness, this guy is completely a devil. Whether he was in the Red House or in the army before, he could at least take a rest. Now he met a king of rolls. The youngest one is so desperate. If we old guys and seniors don't work hard, how can we still have the face to mix? The whole conference room began to become more and more anxious under such a strange misunderstanding. Sherlock hoped that this group of senior leaders would speak up to stop such roles. This group of senior leaders also looked at Sherlock eagerly, hoping that this king of roles would quickly put down the work in his hands and take a rest so that everyone could take a break. So less than 10 minutes after Sherlock received Tony's call and left, these wolf-killing role kings in Sherlock's eyes ran out to rest under Price's big hand. They took a shower and slept, and sincerely hoped that Sherlock, the little devil, would not come back too soon. After learning the whole story from Lorna, Sherlock laughed coldly twice, and then walked towards the meeting room without looking back. Damn it, do you still think I'm a role king? I still think you are role kings. Since you say I'm a role king, let you thoroughly feel what it feels like to be a real role king who has been trained in the workplace of a big country in the East. What? Since Sherlock is going to have a role king competition, why doesn't he call everyone back to work? Haha, this is really a bit of an underestimation of Sherlock's magic potion. You know, although Sherlock's magic potion has great side effects, the efficacy is also really awesome. Sherlock, who has been playing magic for many years, can't sleep. If those muggles who are exposed to magic for the first time can sleep, they will be surprised. Sure enough, not long after Sherlock started to sort out the information in his hands in the office, Price's Squidward version walked into the office door with a cup of coffee and a look of despair on his face. Yes, you read it right, it's Squidward, who is exactly the same as the Squidward in SpongeBob SquarePants. Because of this internal conflict, even his expression is exactly the same as the Squidward in the animation. How to say it, Squidward wearing Price's clothes is still very interesting, isn't it? Chapter 249 Bikini Bottom Special Forces. That's right, Price's entry actually turned him into Squidward. As Price walked into the conference room with Squidward's unique walking sound, Sherlock was trying hard to hold back his laughter. After all, Price's image can be called funny now. Squidward's unique big nose has been hanging down to Price's mouth, and combined with Price's original caterpillar-like beard, it strangely formed a funny cross-like picture. It's okay to have a funny face, but Price's clothes are also funny. Can you imagine what Squidward looks like wearing a combat uniform that only special forces wear, and a camouflage fisherman's hat on his head? The funniest thing is that, because of the long-term intelligence sorting work, Price's expression is infinitely close to Squidward, especially the octopus tentacle holding the coffee cup. Sherlock laughed every time he saw it. In the animation, it seems that Squidward is pretending to be elegant and holding the coffee cup with 2 fingers to drink coffee, but in fact we all blame Squidward. Price tells us from his own experience that, if you don't hold it this way, you can't pick up the coffee cup at all, unless you are not afraid of becoming a sizzling octopus holding a hot coffee cup in your hands. Price also noticed Sherlock laughing on the side, but Price, who was really tired, didn't pay attention to Sherlock. He picked up a file with the suction cup on the tentacles that made up his arms and started reading. You really don't say. This tentacle is really useful for reading books, and it can't be shaken off. Sherlock originally thought that this was the limit of his magic potion, but he never expected that there would be more surprises for Sherlock. Not long after Zhang Price Huge came in, the other members of Team 141 also entered the meeting room one after another with a decadent look on their faces. There is Heizao Kiang Mai and Bao Bao. There is Pai Soap Daxing. The most exciting thing is that there are 2 characters that Sherlock never expected, Sangazdi and Crab Ghost Boss. As soon as the 2 came in, Sherlock couldn't hold back and laughed out loud. It's no wonder Sherlock made such a fuss after all. The styles of the 2 people were too strange. As we all know, Sandy the Squirrel is said to be a female squirrel. Although Sandy's outfit was not restored this time because of the potion, who would have thought that Gates, a battle-hardened man who knows computers, can fight, and likes to use a spray gun in close combat, would speak in Sandy's funny female voice. Not to mention the ghost, Sherlock can laugh at the ghost for a lifetime. You know, the ghost became Mr. Krabs because of the potion, but the ghost is used to wearing his skull mask all the time. The final result is that Mr. Krabs' 2 long eyes stick out from the eye sockets of the ghost's skull mask. It's okay for the eyes to stick out, but Mr. Krabs' nose, which looks like a spike, actually sticks out from the nostrils of the ghost mask. Even Mr. Crab's big mouth inexplicably matches the ghost's skull mask. It's like it was tailor-made. The most important thing is that Mr. Krabs' way of walking was also given to the ghost by the potion. Sherlock swore that this was the first time in his life that he saw the taciturn ghost's calves move so fast. The first time. This is the limited time joint edition of the Bikini Bottom team by Team 141 and Bikini Bottom. The more Sherlock thought about it, the more interesting it was, and the louder his laughter became. After all, when Sherlock left, there was only Price's Squidward. How come Bikini Bottom moved to Sherlock's training ground less than 3 hours after he quietly left? You can laugh if you want Sherlock to laugh. After all, in such an involuted intelligence processing work, the strange side effects of Sherlock's potion are the only fun for everyone. It even developed to the point that every time someone drank the potion, a group of people would stand up and carefully observe what kind of strange side effects it was. But Sherlock was not satisfied with his laughter, and he said in a mean way, "Oh, who lives in the big pineapple in the deep sea?" Although the voice was not loud, you should know that at present, there were only Sherlock and the Bikini Bottom team in the entire conference room. Sherlock's nasty voice successfully aroused the anger of his 5 uncles. The 5 surrounded Sherlock without saying anything, and Zhang Pricefish brother looked at Sherlock fiercely and asked, "What were you singing just now? I ask you what you were singing just now." If it were normal, Sherlock would have pinched it directly at this time, and the little quail would have dared not to say anything. But now facing the 5 warriors of Bikini Bottom who surrounded him, Sherlock was really not afraid, and even repeated it again with great courage. "Oh, who lives in the big pineapple in the deep sea sponge?" Before Sherlock could say the word baby, Zhao Qiang, who was transformed into SpongeBob, hit Sherlock on the head with a knife. But after all, it was SpongeBob. Sherlock didn't feel much pain, but couldn't help laughing. Seeing Sherlock laughing more and more arrogantly, Zhang Pricefish brother could no longer hold back his anger, and waved his tentacles. "Brothers, beat him up." The 5 warriors of Bikini Bottom surrounded Sherlock, and started to kick him crazily, but was it effective? Anyway, Sherlock kept squatting with his head in his hands while laughing, and occasionally he could even sing a few lines of SpongeBob's theme song. The more they were beaten, the angrier they got. In the end, Soap even started to shout out his moves. "Look at me, fisherman karate." As the one being beaten, Sherlock even had the mind to find fault. "Ha ha 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 ha, you're on the wrong track, you fake Patrick. That's a skill from One Piece. Ha 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 ha." The strange-looking Black Widows who were attracted by the sound of the conference room pushed open the door of the conference room and saw the scene of the Bikini Bottom task force beating up a hollow young man with a bird's nest on his head. How to say it, some people's filters were broken, and some people were very excited. After all, the animation SpongeBob SquarePants is a phenomenon, and many adults around the world like to watch this eye-catching animation. The group of Black Widows recruited by Sherlock are no exception. After beating for a long time, the 5 people found that it was useless. Instead, they were exhausted and panting. They all glared at Sherlock, who was still squatting on the bed and laughing, and decided to deal with him later. When they looked up, they found that the whole conference room was surrounded by a large circle of strange Black Widows. Some of them even took out their mobile phones and looked at the 5 people with shining eyes, as if they had seen their idols. Chapter 250 Copyright Battle. After a chaotic commotion, the entire conference room finally returned to its previous busy state, and the Bikini Bottom task force looked at the Black Widows who had returned to work with some lingering fear. How should I put it? The fanatical fans of the second dimension are really scary. The 5 people even felt that all the group photos of this life were taken today. The entire conference room began to continue to roll around under Sherlock's lead, even more than before. After all, Sherlock was going to roll everyone to death this time. Even when sorting out the information, he did not hesitate to use magic as an auxiliary, directly pulling the efficiency to the maximum. Even Sherlock himself felt from time to time that, if he had this energy, before he traveled through time, in the workplace, he will definitely be promoted and get a raise, become the general manager, serve as a CEO, marry a white, rich and beautiful woman, and reach the peak of life. Even if it is not in the workplace, in terms of study, then he will definitely pass the civil service examination and the postgraduate entrance examination. If it was earlier, before the college entrance examination, it would be a full score of 750, and I would score 749, and I could choose any university in the country. Faced with Sherlock's attitude of if I can't kill myself, I'll kill you all, these uncles, aunts, brothers, and sisters who are older than Sherlock can't stand it. After all, Sherlock can't do it alone, but he will supervise you to do it with him. It's impossible for him to be lazy. Under the effect of magic, he doesn't even need to get up to pour coffee. If there is no coffee in the cup, he will jump off the table and take it from the coffee machine to fill it up, and then come back. Even the pile of unorganized material seems to have grown legs. When you finish one, the next one will fly to you quickly. It can be said that there is no time to rest, except going to the toilet. This situation continued until noon the next day, and everyone was finally liberated. As for the reason for liberation, it is also very simple. An unlucky guy drew an entry for a clone. Looking at the room full of Patrick, Sherlock couldn't help but feel a little worried when he left the meeting room. After all, you know how smart Patrick is. Although that Patrick was made of soap, Sherlock was really afraid that when he came back, he would not see the organized intelligence, but a room full of shredded paper, and then a room full of Patrick stars having a party. In addition, Sherlock was also worried about these guys who were temporarily liberated. During this day, the entries that came out of the magic potion machine seemed to have discovered a new world, and various cartoon characters began to appear in groups. Now all the protagonists of the 4 cartoons of The Simpsons, Rick and Morty, Futurama, and Family Guy have been gathered. It can be said that the cartoon characters are holding a conference. Even Sherlock himself did not escape this curse, and became a signature cartoon character, Homo, with only 3 hairs on his head and a weight of nearly 300 pounds. The situation at that time can be said to have scared Sherlock. In his 2 lifetimes, it was the first time Sherlock saw the buttons of his shirt fly out like bullets, the first time he heard the loud noise of a broken belt, and even the first time he knew what it felt like to have his clothes torn apart on his body. However, Sherlock also knew a little bit why Homo was basically in a white shirt with a pair of jeans in the animation. Because in the lighthouse, for Homo's body shape, the easiest clothes to buy are white shirts and jeans. This was told to Sherlock by the Talalita who were temporarily assigned to buy clothes. Of course, when the entry was out of order, it was not just Sherlock who was amazed. It can be said that everyone in the entire conference room and the Talalita were amazed. The most typical example is a Black Widow. This guy actually drew the same entry as Sherlock, but Sherlock was Homo, and the unlucky Black Widow was Maggie. Have you ever seen a 1-meter high cannon pan head? Well, Sherlock and everyone in the conference room have seen it, and it's purple. Even the person himself was very curious about his 1-meter high cannon pan head, and repeatedly dug in it with his hands. As for the robot Bender and the grandfather, it goes without saying. The Black Widow who turned into Bender also experienced for the first time what it felt like to put something in her stomach. And the Black Widow who turned into the grandfather replaced the coffee with strong liquor on the spot. In short, the whole meeting had already begun to develop from a chaos of demons to a copyright war before Patrick of Soap took over. Oh, by the way, I would like to say that Band's butt is really shiny. It is an underestimation to say that it can be used as a mirror. Sherlock used magic to test it, and the result was that it was absolutely smooth. Can you believe it? Of course, these are not the most exciting. The most exciting thing is that there is a small group of Black Widows. Under the blessing of Sherlock's potion, they have become the people under the biggest copyright maniac in North America. Looking at the 2 mice, 2 ducks, 2 dogs, and a fox, let alone Sherlock, even Price's legs are trembling. Otherwise, he would not have arranged for everyone to rest immediately after Soap was able to split himself. After all, is the strongest legal department in North America kidding you? If someone discovers a bunch of copyrighted products, either the lawsuit will be fought to death, or these people will immediately sell themselves to each other, live in a luxurious castle, and become Spokespersons who don't need to wear puppet clothes and live seriously. The most important thing is that the Spokesperson only has 24 hours to work and then pay off the debt. The thought of the lawsuit is enough to make people feel scared. Price really feels that, if he doesn't stop, whether everyone can collect or not is another matter. Especially when the room is full of people who are under the copyright. It is really hard to explain. Apart from the group of people who have had a lot of fun, but can't go out at that time, the Talalita may be the happiest in this situation. After all, they are still young and like animation. Now the characters in the animation they have seen appear vividly in front of them. The Talalita are even happier than going to the amusement park. Change shifts? What shifts? No one can stop me from chasing stars. Even the Hasselblad SLR that Sherlock bought and collected at the beginning of his time travel because of the sudden wealth was requisitioned by the Talalita. In a day and a half, they took more than 10 gigabytes of photos. That guy has all kinds of group photos, personal photos, and work photos. Sherlock exclaimed that he is a good guy. No wonder these Talalis were not in such a good mood when I took them to the comic convention. This was a wrong cosplay. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.